evening, everyone, and welcome to The Proof is Out There, the Satan Files. Tonight, we are not giving sympathy to the devil, but we are giving him an hour's worth of attention. That's because while the concept of Satan dates back to at least 600 BC, there are many people today who say there's proof he's real. We're not speaking metaphorically here. We are talking about a powerful, malevolent, supernatural entity, real enough not only to bring evil into this world, but to physically possess bodies, minds, and souls of innocent people, and in some cases, even inanimate objects. Think it's all just superstition? Well, tonight, you'll see several videos and hear audio recordings that might challenge your view. But first, let's give the devil his due.
Dante described him as a monstrous winged beast. Milton described him as a Promethean-like hero. As long as humans have been talking about good and evil, they've been talking about the devil.
This stuff is accepted in most cultures in the world and throughout history.
Lucifer, Beelzebub, Satan, whatever you call him, the concept of the devil can be found mentioned across a multitude of religions, including Judaic, Islamic, and Christian faiths. Although many believe he appears in the Bible as the serpent in the Garden of Eden, a more humanoid form first appeared in the book of Job as a servant angel named Ha-Satan. And the devil we know and recognize today would materialize much later within the scripture of the New Testament.
Biblically speaking, when we talk about demons or devils, we're actually talking about fallen angels, these preternatural realities that have turned their back on God forever.
To this day, Satan and his menagerie of demons remains front and center in our films, books, podcasts, and TV shows. And some would argue that their presence in the real world has been rising as well. In fact, a recent survey by the Pew Research Center found that more than 62% of Americans believe in some version of hell, up from 58% in 2014. So it's no wonder that demonic encounters are being reported with great frequency. Take, for example, this 2020 video from Beirut that shows a horrific warehouse explosion. Many believed this crimson cloud left in the aftermath actually revealed the devil himself.
I would say that evil, broadly speaking, yes, it does exist. Now, as far as the figurehead that we know as Satan or the devil, that's very difficult to say.
With a recent influx of devil-related conspiracy theories, it's not surprising that reports of demonic activity appear to be on an upswing, and with it, a worldwide increase in the art of exorcism.
We might assume that exorcisms are extremely rare. But there are reports that exorcisms happen almost every single day.
In Italy, there are now 500,000 requests for exorcisms every year. Renowned psychiatrist Dr. Richard Gallagher has been witness to dozens of exorcisms and has worked as a psychiatric advisor to faith leaders around the world. When exorcists need help, he's the one they call.
I'm extremely committed to the scientific method. My essential task is to make sure there's no medical or psychiatric explanation. So I'm ruling out the kind of conditions that often get confused for demonic conditions. People who have severe personality disorders, people who are very hysterical or histrionic or suggestible, multiple personality disorder. These are the most common conditions.
Gallagher eventually became a scientific advisor for the International Association of Exorcists, an organization recognized by the Pope himself. And it's not just the Catholic Church taking up the charge. New Age exorcists like Jeffrey Seelman are working with an increasing number of businesses and residences, all claiming to be disturbed by something sinister from beyond.
Unfortunately, in my line of work, I have to tell people that the reason that their house is under attack, or their business, or their daughter, or their child in the cradle, is simply because the spirit wants to see how far it can go. It wants to destroy all things that are good.
But the question still remains, can we confirm that any of this demonic activity is actually real and proof of some nefarious underworld? We begin with the idea that evil forces can not only possess people, but objects as well. Stephen King's famous novel, Christine, was about the possession of a 1958 Plymouth Fury. And this video is about the alleged possession of a bus.
June 2022, Kapiti Coast, New Zealand. Craig Meek and his daughter, Amy, are visiting family in Raumati Beach when they smell gas. They wander outside right as the lights on their neighbor's vacant bus turn on. Meek pulls out his camera and records this. A bus is engulfed by a mysterious fire with a ferocity that is sure to spread to the neighboring homes. Inexplicably, it turns on and lurches across the road, but there's no one inside. Onlookers scatter in bewilderment as the fiery phantom vehicle is finally stopped by a cluster of trees.
You've got a bus that has just started moving on its own, engulfed in flames, the lights were flashing, the horn beeping. The question is, what's driving this thing? There's some, what appears to be invisible force that's navigating this.
Brooks says the idea of spirits possessing inanimate objects is nothing new.
Possession, from a traditional understanding, has to do with this idea that there's some kind of intelligence that wants to control something outside of itself. In some cases, possessing inanimate objects. That inanimate object, like a bus or even a doll, can become animated and do certain things that would frighten the heck out of people.
This is Robert the Doll, which sits in the East Martello Museum in Key West, Florida. Robert was given to a boy named Robert Eugene Otto, who owned the doll until he died in 1974. Over the years, the doll has allegedly moved its head, changed its facial expressions, and even giggled. According to legend, the doll had been cursed in a voodoo ceremony as revenge for something that family had done. If any of that's true, could the bus be under a similar spell, though one that's more benevolent?
This is a bus that was owned by a man and his wife, and the husband said that the wife loved this bus.
Now, as if this weren't spooky enough, it turns out the wife passed away while sitting inside this exact same bus. So when we see the bus drive across the street to a safer place where it won't catch the house on fire, we have to ask, is this the spirit of the wife trying to protect her husband and their home?
It's a theory the widowed bus owner believes.
I wonder if my wife taking me away. My wife probably didn't want the lady to do it down.
The fact that the headlights came on and the horn continues to beep. The wife, or some force, is trying to get people out of the way.
Back in 2003, a story surfaced about a small wine cabinet that many believed was haunted by a debuk, a demonic spirit from Jewish folklore. This debuk box supposedly exchanged hands since the Holocaust, bringing illness and bad luck to all of its owners, until its last owner took a rabbi's suggestion and locked it inside a container lined with gold, where the spirit is said to be imprisoned until this day. Could this bus be hosting a similar entity? Let's go to the experts.
A positive spirit could very well have operated that vehicle and driven it to safety across the street. There are so many more positive spirits out there than negative spirits. It's just that negative spirits get all the credit. Sometimes miracles do happen.
But theoretical physics professor Michio Kaku thinks the explanation behind this video is far less supernatural.
We've all seen the movies where the bad guy gets into a car, steals the car by hot wiring the car. Underneath the steering wheel, there are two wires, normally uncrossed, but you can short circuit the circuitry and the car starts up all by itself. Same thing here. The fire melted the insulation so that two wires crossed and the engine started all by itself.
But the one thing that's not so explicable is how this vehicle moves the way it does. According to Kaku, that would require an exceptional series of coincidences.
First of all, you have electricity in the car, next you have gasoline, and then you have all the gears and the mechanical mechanisms. Here's a situation where all three must fail, and the road may not be perfectly flat, which could cause the tires to swerve. Maybe you can explain away a lot of these incidents. But I can see why people believe in ghosts, because once in a while, something bizarre happens, something very unusual.
Our verdict, we're going with unexplained. Unfortunately, we can't quite determine how or why the bus moved the way it did. In the meantime, be wary around any odd-behaving objects. You never know what type of unknown force may be operating within. This next story is perhaps the most famous real-life example of demonic possession, so viewer discretion is advised.
September 1975, Klingenberg, West Germany. After years of their daughter's continually declining health and increasingly strange behavior, the parents of 23-year-old Anneliese Michel turned to the Catholic Church for help. Recording devices capture these conversations in German over the course of a harrowing 67 exorcism attempts.
Ich verfrechte so, dass ich in dem Wald rein bin, wo ich sowieso nicht mehr sie sehe, weil ich ihn hier trenne. Und Janne nach.
If you can believe it, that's Anneliese speaking in a voice allegedly not her own. How did this all begin?
At the age of 16, Anneliese Michel had some severe experiences, such as blackouts and feeling a heavy weight pressing her to her bed. She was diagnosed with epilepsy, but the medication didn't seem to help. And by the age of 20, she began to hear voices and had a great distaste for being in the presence of religious objects, crucifixes or relics. She began to injure herself. She bit the head off of a bird. She drank her own urine from the floor. She was barking like a dog. It was at this point that everyone around her thought that she was truly possessed.
The increasingly desperate family turned to their local priests for help.
In 1975, exorcisms began on Anneliese Michel on a bi-weekly basis, each lasting as long as 4 hours. Anneliese began to claim that she was possessed by people like Cain and Hitler.
Hitler!
This story does not end well. On July 1st, 1976, after 10 months of continuous exorcisms, Anneliese died in her home. The priests and her parents claimed that just before she passed, she was freed from her possession, and the exorcism was a success. Let's see what our experts think.
First, forensic audio analyst Rob Maher takes a listen to those supposedly inhuman noises.
If we compare the girl's speech in the recording to what a voice actor is able to produce, that voice actor is able to produce a very similar quality to what we hear from this girl.
Since the growls could be easily produced by a human play acting, many are skeptical that this was a legitimate demonic possession.
The conversations were immature. There was way too much talk about things that a demonic spirit would have no interest in.
According to Seelman, the demon is more likely to attack the person performing the exorcism, not the religious institution.
The demonic spirit is going to try to make the priest feel weak, insult their personal lives. Everything that I heard was really anger at the Catholic Church itself. And it was well known that the people of this town were very conservative and religious. No dating, no fun, no going out at night. And so it would not be surprising that Anneliese Michel was pretty unhappy with what was going on.
Dr. Hope agrees. This culture, combined with Annalise's previous diagnosis, seemed to create a perfect storm.
She had a diagnosis of temporal lobe epilepsy, which can lead to psychotic symptoms such as delusions and hallucinations. Having very religious beliefs, those stories and themes of the devil became very real to her and must have been absolutely terrifying.
But if this was epilepsy, why wasn't Annalise responding to standard treatment?
Even today, with these type of illnesses, we aren't always able to get people symptom-free. It doesn't mean that the diagnosis wasn't correct or that other diagnoses such as demonic possession are an explanation.
So how did this disturbing scenario ultimately reach its end?
In the last few weeks, she was not able to eat and drink very much at all. It was noted she had bilateral fractures, so broken knees due to the fact that she was praying so much. She died at the young age of 23 and weighed only 68 pounds. The actual cause of death was malnutrition and dehydration. Her parents and the priests were charged and convicted of negligent homicide. And the state prosecutor sadly said that even up to a week before her death, if she'd have got treatment, then her life could have been saved.
Our verdict, mental illness. We agree with that historic conclusion, in part because of the analysis of the recordings themselves. Hopefully, Annalise is finally resting in peace. These next images raise a disturbing question. Are people practicing satanic rituals in the woods? The incident involves a naked woman, a mutilated deer, and, well, just look for yourself. If you dare.
February 21st, 2021, Powell River in British Columbia, Canada. Local resident Karina Wallace-Chuck's grandfather comes across a deer carcass while walking just outside his property.
He had a little chat with the neighbor, and he agreed to let him put up a trail cam just to see what maybe killed it.
At around 5 o'clock, the motion sensor camera snaps away at a bobcat. But then, an hour later, after it gets dark and the camera switches to night vision, it captures a macabre scene. A sequence of photos depicts a nearly naked woman with long dark hair. She crouches down, holding the deer's leg near her mouth, as a second long-haired person joins her before both mysteriously disappear.
I was pretty creeped out. My thoughts were either someone's on drugs or they've got a really weird kink.
Karina eventually decides to put the pictures online to see if she can get some answers.
I originally posted it on a Facebook group I'm on, like, what do you think of this? And that's where all the like, oh, witches, and all these things came out.
After many likes and shares, these fawn feasters make international headlines. Author Alexis Brooks says that's for good reason.
Clearly, this was a very strange act. It almost looks like they are bending over in a sign of devotion. I think we're looking at some sort of a really, really dark ritual.
So is it possible we're witnessing the aftermath of some witches' satanic supper?
There are certain satanic cults that engage in sacrifice to get power from the soul of the animal and bring that power into the individual that is doing the sacrifice, or a coven of satanic worshipers.
In fact, Brooks says there's a recent alleged case of satanic animal sacrifice from 2021, which will blur because it's disturbing.
Several dead goats were discovered, found dumped in a northeast El Paso desert. Texas Parks and Wildlife officials say some of these goats were actually missing bodily fluids like blood, so they directly correlated it to a potential satanic act.
Sacrificing animals for a cult-like ritual sounds pretty gruesome. But get this, the United States has legislation protecting ritual slaughter for some religions. So is there any meat on the bone in this potentially fiendish feast? Let's ask the experts.
Anthropologist Kathy Strange says that though people often associate witchcraft with Satanism, This connection is mostly a myth, especially in modern times.
Witchcraft in general is still plenty alive in Canada and America, and it's really just as tame as maybe palm or tarot readings. They perform seances, cast spells, conjure the dead, that type of thing. It's more like Wicca, where you worship nature as a whole versus Satan.
Yet that doesn't make what these people are doing any less dangerous. Emergency medicine physician Dr. Ed Hope shares some raw truths about animal flesh.
Eating raw meat, you are at serious risk of getting a zoonotic infection. That is one pass from animal to humans.
In fact, dining on a decaying carcass can be downright deadly.
The carcass is going to have lots of bacteria, such as E. coli or Salmonella, but also there are some that are specific to dead animals. One of these diseases called tularemia, also known as rabbit fever, and this is an extremely deadly bacteria.
Yet, is this mysterious figure actually even consuming the carcass?
I mean, we can't say for sure if she's trying to eat it. She's certainly holding it up close to her mouth, but she could just be looking at it. There's no conclusive evidence to say she is actually eating it from what I see here.
But even if this woman is not eating the dead deer, her actions still seem to defy logic. So how do we slice this one up?
To me, what we're seeing here is obviously a hoax. These two people probably thought it would be funny to dress up in long wigs, take off some of their clothing, and get their pictures taken on the camera. But I don't think these people had any ill intention to be called a witch or anything like that. They just thought it would be funny.
Corina herself agrees.
There's a trailer park down the road. A few questionable characters live there. I'd like to think that was the prank. That's what makes me sleep at night, thinking that.
Our verdict, though these pictures are pretty creepy, this incident is likely a hoax. Trail cameras have a tendency to attract all sorts of tricksters and attention seekers. Does hell exist? Today, most people think of it as a spiritual place, but historically, it was thought to be a physical place, deep underground. And when one research team decided to dig as deep as humanly possible, they may have recorded something truly unholy.
It's 1989 in Murmansk, Russia. A Russian government project named the Kola Super Deep Borehole is in the process of trying to drill the deepest hole in the world as part of a drilling race with the U.S. to uncover scientific mysteries close to the Earth's core. But when these scientists reach 7.6 miles into the Earth's crust, their equipment begins to suffer odd malfunctions. According to the story, several heat-resistant microphones were lowered into the hole in an attempt to discover what was going wrong. Years later, a recording surfaced that alleges to capture what these mics picked up, and the sounds are nothing short of terrifying. We hear what sounds like an endless cacophony of human screams. The scientists themselves allegedly refer to it as the sounds of hell.
Unfortunately, the Russian government is not releasing a lot of information, but it could be some kind of warning, like a bad spirit, saying maybe you shouldn't drill down this far because you're not going to like what comes up.
Christians began to quit, concerned that perhaps this was something that they should not have done, or for fear of divine reprisal for accidentally or purposefully drilling into hell itself.
At this time, speculation began to swirl about why the Russians were drilling in Kola in the first place.
A lot of religions believe that hell itself exists below the surface of the earth. There was some questioning as to whether the Russians were attempting to make contact with the devil.
The majority of human beings throughout history have always believed in hell. I've had so many experiences at exorcisms and evil spirits, they certainly acknowledge that they are coming from hell.
But if hell exists, is it underground? While the general idea of hell goes back to the time of Christ, it wasn't until the Middle Ages that hell was depicted as a pit of pain and torture.
We really get our most descriptive versions of hell from Italian poet Dante, who wrote the Inferno or the Divine Comedy. We see kind of this layered approach as Dante goes deeper into hell, and the final circles of hell are these horrible, fiery places, and souls are essentially tortured for their evil deeds on earth. If we believe that hell is a real physical place, it stands to reason that those millions of souls would scream out in agony quite loudly from the bowels of this hellish cavern through the Earth's mantle.
Back in 2016, a Michigan-based priest claimed he got a glimpse of hell after suffering a heart attack. He said he saw his soul travel deep into the center of the earth, where he witnessed men being burned alive and humanoids that walked on all fours. Could this audio recording help verify those visions? Let's listen to the experts.
NASA geologist Bob Anderson explores the initial problem with the Kola super deep hole, those odd equipment malfunctions.
As you go deeper down into the rock, the Earth is getting warmer. And so as they go down, the drill bits start slowing down. When they put the microphones down, the temperature was increasing to a very high temperature. We don't have microphones that can handle 2,000 degrees. And so basically, the microphones are deteriorating as they go down, and you get some really weird sounds.
So the heat might have produced the recorded sounds, but to many, they do sound human.
The sounds that we can identify are moans and howls that are within the frequency range and the characteristics that a human could produce.
Could this truly be a chorus of the damned? According to Maher, the devil is in the details.
There are several characteristics in the spectrogram that we can see that have an identical duplicate at other points in the recording. So there's a particular shriek utterance here, which matches one at the beginning, and then that same utterance appears here at the end. It would be literally impossible to make those exact duplicates that we see here. So again, the indications are that those are simply loops of a single recording. This was mixed or put together rather than being a continuous, authentic recording.
Our verdict, we are saying this is a hoax tied to a real event. Well, the drilling operation itself was in fact real. The stories of these strange sounds seem to be nothing more than fiction. In recent years, the depth record of the Kola borehole has already been broken twice. So if there is anything that lies below, we may be getting closer and closer to finding it. Can evil spirits possess our bodies even after we die? In our next story, we take a look at evidence from an ancient burial ground that indicates a genuine fear of the undead among a terrified community. Were they onto something?
It's late 2023 in the village of Pien, Poland. Darius Polinsky, along with his team of fellow researchers, are excavating an unmarked 17th century cemetery, first discovered in 2005. Archaeologists have unearthed nearly 100 graves at the site. Their digs just keep getting stranger until they make this ghastly discovery. This photo shows remains that archaeologists say are those of a 6-year-old boy who was buried face down with a padlock under his left foot that's seemingly chaining him to the earth as if to keep the body from getting up and leaving the grave.
Pozwala stwierdzić, że jednak jest to cmentarz dość taki nietypowy. O tym cmentarzu nie ma w ogóle praktycznie żadnych danych w źródłach pisanych.
A woman's body was also found in the cemetery with a sickle around the neck, placed in such a way that if the deceased tried to get up, the head would be severed or at least injured.
Nigdzie, bo w Polsce podobne groby są, no pewnie dziecka. To jest on absolutnie, można powiedzieć, unikatowy. Tutaj podobnie jak ten grób tak zwanej wampirki.
What's going on here? Journalist Aaron McCarthy says it could tie back to the concept of reanimation.
Reanimation of this kind was a really big fear in Poland in the 17th century. They were really afraid of revenants. Revenant might not be a term that many people are familiar with. It actually comes from the French word revenir, meaning to come back, and it describes a number of creatures that rise from the dead.
If the idea behind the demonic-like beings known as revenants sounds familiar, it's because the concept would overlap into what we now call the vampire. Many folklorists suggest that there was a perceived outbreak of vampirism in most of Eastern Europe during the 17th and 18th centuries, where many individuals reported seeing violent acts perpetrated by recently deceased individuals who continued to walk the earth.
One famous tale is in 1674, a Polish man rose from the dead and he was going around sucking the blood of his neighbors. His nocturnal wanderings only stopped when the body was decapitated.
Historians suggest materials made of iron, like the small lock, were used to keep members of the undead at bay.
There are hundreds of burials like this across the Baltic states, in Poland, in Bulgaria, and in other areas. Vampire burials were so pervasive at this time that officials actually banned them to try to tamp down on the superstitions about the creatures. However, this is the only time a child has been found buried this way.
Many scholars today believe that the legends we now know as vampires first originated amongst Slavic people as early as the 4th century. The word vampire itself is thought to be derived from the Latin word impurus, meaning impure or unclean. Could these remains really belong to early bloodsuckers? Let's see what our experts think.
Archaeologist Dr. Ed Barnhart believes we are seeing what he calls apotropaic burials, burials conducted in a specific manner with the intention of warding off evil.
Practically speaking, shackling someone's toe is not going to prevent them from getting up. But they're talismans. The material mattered, the placement mattered, but they were basically magic incantations that prevented that body from coming back.
But Barnhart suggests that the reason this child may have been considered a revenant-like vampire could be due to ignorance of a more real-world condition.
Somehow or another, these people were mistreated or misunderstood. Perhaps they had a mental illness that people didn't sympathize with. But the remedy was always the same. Keep that body in its grave. Make sure that it can't wriggle out of the dirt and come for us.
Anthropologist Kathy Strain adds that sometimes just getting sick and dying could provoke this extreme reaction.
During the time of the plague, they probably overreacted in fear, and that might be what we're seeing here. It logically makes sense to me that the 6-year-old was probably targeted because he was sick first, and they wanted to make sure that whatever it is that he had didn't spread.
Our verdict? We're going with superstitious burial. There has never been tangible proof over the last several centuries to establish the existence of revenant-like vampires. But whatever was going on with this child spooked these people enough to bury him in this way. We end tonight with a disturbing piece of video out of Poland. As we mentioned earlier, many European countries are showing a steady increase in reports of supposed demonic possession. And in this case, the local cops had to get involved.
We're in Poland again, but this story is much more recent. It's New Year's Eve 2022 in the village of Grubsko. 3 local policemen are dispatched to a house after receiving a phone call from a disturbed neighbor who claims to be hearing strange noises coming from within. This horrifying video has been verified as real by the Polish police. Supposedly, these monstrous sounds are coming from a 20-year-old woman named Kamilka, who has barricaded herself inside the attic. The police attempt to coax her out as she continues to snarl like some type of ferocious beast.
If there was ever such a thing as a classic demonic possession, this would be it. Clearly, this is somebody who went out of her element, her own personality, and for whatever reason, took on the personality of another.
And while Brooks stresses that this is just a first impression, she says that Poland has become ground zero of sorts, in a battle between satanic forces and the religiously devout.
Poland is actually the largest Roman Catholic population in all of Europe. So there's a concentration of exorcists in Poland, about the same number as the whole United States, and yet Poland is only about the size of New Mexico.
Brooks mentions online rumors claim Kamilka had been using a Ouija board with friends earlier that same evening.
There's a very rich and long history associated with the Ouija board. It became known in the early 20th century as something that would be used as portals to other dimensions in which certain entities can then come through. There are story after story of nefarious incidents happening, including but not limited to possession as a result of using a Ouija board.
The Ouija board was originally invented as a parlor game in the late 1800s when many Americans became obsessed with the spiritual idea of communicating with the dead. By the 20th century, it was a tool frequently used by popular occultists like Aleister Crowley. Many experts believe Ouija boards should not be taken lightly.
These things do communicate with spirits. The problem being is that 1 minute you're talking to your wonderful deceased grandmother, and the next minute you're talking to a demonic spirit.
So could Kamilka have accidentally opened the door to an evil entity? And could that explain how a 20-year-old girl can make these inhuman sounds?
Something negative got to this woman. Something scared her so badly she lost her mind. Might have even become possessed.
With more than 150 exorcists currently working in Poland, the practice has become so popular that the Catholic Church has approved plans for an exorcism center in the country's city of Katowice. It's described as a place where priests will be able to hone and perfect their exorcism skills. So are we witnessing an actual case of demonic possession in this video? Or is there something else going on? We turn to our experts.
As we did in our other investigations into demonic possession, we checked in with our forensic audio analyst to see if these sounds were even human.
For a normal speech sound or even somebody yelling, we expect that the fundamental frequency is probably in the range of perhaps 200 hertz, 250 hertz. But with this growl sound, there's a lot of energy right around 1,000 hertz.
So does that mean these vocalizations are truly inhuman? Not necessarily.
If we look at a recording that has been made of a voice actor, we see again that we have this energy located in the spectrum up at around 1,000 hertz, which is what we also heard in the sound from the recording scene. So it's plausible that a human being would be able to make that shriek sound.
Okay, so nothing inhuman about these sounds. Psychiatrist and demonic possession expert Richard Gallagher is also conflicted on this being real evidence of an actual possession.
There is some suggestive sign that that's a possibility, but you'd need a lot more evidence. I would want to know much more about this woman's background, interview people who know her and find out more about her history. Almost all the time, if you get all the facts of the case, you can make a discernment one way or the other.
And while many of the facts remain shrouded in mystery, authorities confirmed that the woman in this video was eventually checked into a hospital.
Whenever a young person presents to the hospital with bizarre behavior, illicit drug use has to be high up on your list of differentials. It's not uncommon for people to be like this in hospital. If we were to witness that in the emergency department, it wouldn't even be the most crazy story of the week. I think this footage conjures up the idea of a horror movie. But based on the limited evidence, there's no clear understanding of exactly what's gone on.
The night was unusually silent, the kind of silence that felt almost conspiratorial, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Detective Lydia Hayes had walked this beat for over a decade, and yet tonight, as she navigated the dimly lit corridors of her city, she felt a shiver of unease creeping along her spine. The streets were deserted, and the neon signs of closed shops flickered weakly, casting elongated, distorted shadows across the cracked pavement. She had received a call just an hour ago, A local historian had reported a series of inexplicable disturbances at an abandoned church on the outskirts of town. At first, she had assumed it was some prank, teenagers seeking thrills in a crumbling building, but the urgency in the caller's voice had unsettled her. "It's not just a ghost story," he had said, his tone trembling. "I've seen things that shouldn't exist. You need to see it for yourself." And now, as she approached the wrought iron gates, which groaned with the weight of years and neglect, she understood that this was no ordinary assignment. The church loomed ahead, its spire piercing the night sky like a jagged nail. Its stone walls were covered in creeping ivy, blackened with the grime of decades, and the windows were shuttered, leaving gaping eyes that stared out into the darkness. She parked her car on the cracked asphalt of the lot and stepped out, the chill in the air biting through her coat. The wind whispered through the ruins, carrying with it a faint, almost imperceptible murmur that seemed to be coming from within. Lydia took a deep breath and activated the flashlight on her belt, its beam cutting through the shadows, revealing a path strewn with rubble, broken pews, and overturned hymnals. Her boots crunched on the debris, and every step seemed to echo unnaturally in the cavernous interior. She paused near the altar, her eyes scanning the gloom. The air was thick, almost viscous, carrying the smell of damp earth and decaying wood. And then she saw it, a symbol etched into the floorboards, deep and deliberate, glowing faintly as if illuminated by some inner fire. It was a pentagram, surrounded by strange, looping runes that she did not recognize, yet felt inexplicably familiar. Her pulse quickened, and she crouched, examining the markings. Something about them made her skin crawl, as if they were not merely painted symbols but a language meant to penetrate the mind itself. She reached for her notebook and began sketching, noting the angles, the curvature, and the eerie symmetry. That's when she heard it, a whisper, low and guttural, coming from behind the altar. She spun around, flashlight beam slicing through the darkness, revealing nothing but shadows. "Hello." Her voice trembled slightly, the words swallowed by the vast emptiness. No response. Only the whispering continued, growing louder, overlapping in multiple tones, each syllable curling around her consciousness like smoke. She backed away slowly, trying to maintain her composure. Her hand rested on the grip of her service weapon, though she doubted it could defend her against whatever presence lingered here. She took another step and froze. The shadows seemed to move independently, riding against the walls, as if the building itself were alive, breathing, shifting in anticipation of something unseen. Then came the first scream, a sharp, piercing wail that reverberated through the stone halls, stopping her heart for a moment. She wanted to call for backup, but her phone had no signal. The historian's voice echoed in her mind, warning her that this was not just superstition. There was a darkness here, ancient and patient, and it had chosen this night to awaken. Gathering courage, she advanced toward the source, each step a battle against the instinct to flee. The altar was empty, yet the pentagram glowed brighter, pulsating rhythmically, like a heartbeat. Suddenly, the air shifted, and a shadow detached itself from the far wall. It was humanoid in shape, but its proportions were grotesque, elongated. Limbs moving with an unnatural fluidity. Its face was obscured by darkness, yet the feeling of being watched was suffocating, pressing against Lydia's chest. She aimed her flashlight directly at it, and for a moment, the beam illuminated a face that no human should possess, eyes completely black, hollow and infinite, staring into her very soul. The creature tilted its head, and the whispering became intelligible, a language that seemed to crawl inside her mind. "You cannot leave," it hissed. "The proof is out there, and we will find it." Her knees buckled, but she forced herself to remain standing, adrenaline surging. She knew she was alone, truly alone, and yet she felt as if hundreds of unseen eyes bore down upon her, scrutinizing every thought, every fear. She raised her weapon, hand shaking, and fired. The shots echoed in the empty church, striking the creature, yet it did not falter. It dissipated into a cloud of black smoke, only to reassemble moments later closer to her. Panic rose in her chest, but she forced herself to focus, to think. This was not a mere haunting, it was something far older, far more malevolent. She needed evidence, something tangible to prove the reality of what she faced. Her eyes darted around the altar, and they fell upon a small, leather-bound book lying partially hidden beneath the floorboards. The cover was etched with the same runes as the pentagram, and a faint warmth emanated from it. She picked it up, feeling the weight of centuries in her hands. Opening it, she discovered pages filled with symbols, diagrams of ritualistic nature, and writings that defied comprehension. The ink seemed to move on its own, forming new shapes and words as she watched. Her head spun, her vision blurred, but a single sentence emerged clearly: "The covenant of shadows is eternal, the proof shall never be denied." A noise behind her made her whirl around. The creature had returned, closer than before, and this time it was accompanied by whispers that sounded like chanting. She could feel the vibrations in her chest, the words trying to implant themselves directly into her mind. She stumbled backward, tripping over a broken pew, the book still clutched tightly in her hands. The creature raised a hand, and the shadows around it thickened, forming tendrils that reached toward her, cold and insistent. She remembered her training, forcing herself to breathe, to focus. The flashlight flickered, dying for a moment, and in that brief darkness, she felt an overwhelming sense of being consumed. When the light returned, the creature was gone, leaving only a swirl of black mist hovering near the altar. She sank to the floor, heart pounding, hands trembling. The book lay open before her, as if inviting her to read further, to uncover secrets that humanity was never meant to know. She hesitated, but curiosity, that dangerous human trait, overcame fear. She traced her fingers over the symbols, feeling the faint pulse of energy that seemed to emanate from the pages. A sudden realization struck her: the disturbances reported by the historian were not random, they were patterns, messages, proofs left behind by forces that sought recognition. Each event, each sighting, each inexplicable phenomenon was part of a larger tapestry, one that had been carefully woven across decades, even centuries. The whispers returned, softer now, almost pleading. They spoke of revelations, of truths buried beneath the veneer of reality, truths that could shatter minds and societies alike. Lydia felt her resolve harden. She would uncover this proof, document it, and expose it to the world, no matter the cost. She rose to her feet, gripping the book tightly, the whispers guiding her, yet resisting, challenging her. Outside, the first light of dawn began to creep over the horizon, casting long shadows through the broken windows. The city would awaken soon, oblivious to the horrors lurking just beyond its edge. She took one last look at the pentagram before stepping out into the cold morning air, knowing that this was only the beginning. The Satan Files had begun, and there was no turning back. Detective Lydia Hayes drove back into the city, the first rays of dawn painting the skyline in hues of cold gold and pale pink, but the beauty of the morning did little to soothe the gnawing tension in her chest. The abandoned church, with its malevolent aura, lingered in her mind like a shadow she could not shake. Her hands gripped the steering wheel tightly, knuckles white, as though the act of holding it firmly might anchor her to reality. The book she had retrieved lay on the passenger seat beside her, leather cover worn but exuding a palpable energy that seemed to hum faintly, like the echo of a heartbeat. She dared not open it again while driving. The last time had nearly sent her into a panic, the pages alive with symbols that twisted and shifted under her gaze. Her mind raced, cataloguing every detail from the previous night, the pentagram, the runes, the creature whose hollow black eyes had pierced her soul. She had faced horrors before in her line of work, but nothing like this. This was different. Ancient. Predatory. Intent on leaving her scarred, either physically or mentally, or perhaps both. Arriving at the precinct, Lydia parked her car in the nearly empty lot. The early hour meant most of her colleagues were still arriving, the hum of fluorescent lights and coffee machines slowly filling the space with life. She carried the book with a reverent caution, as if it were both a weapon and a threat. She passed through the front doors and headed straight for the evidence room, where she had access to secure containment for unusual items. This was not just a case file, this was something beyond the ordinary, something that could not be photographed, fingerprinted, or filed in the usual way. She needed a controlled environment, somewhere the book's strange energy could not reach beyond its confines, or at least, somewhere she could attempt to study it safely. Inside the evidence room, she placed the book on a stainless steel table, the harsh overhead lights glinting off its worn edges. She donned gloves, resisting the impulse to touch it with bare hands, though curiosity burned behind her caution. Slowly, she opened it again. The symbols seemed to shimmer in the light, moving ever so slightly, like liquid ink trying to escape the confines of paper. Lydia flipped the pages, careful to note every diagram, every incantation, every page that appeared to record events she could hardly believe. There were sketches of human figures, drawn in poses that resembled ancient rituals. Notes in a spidery hand described celestial alignments, the phases of the moon, and obscure references to summoning something referred to as the eternal witness. She scribbled notes in her own notebook, trying to keep track, to anchor herself in the logic of documentation even as the air in the room felt charged, almost vibrating with a subtle energy she could not explain. Hours passed. The precinct slowly filled with the usual morning bustle, officers discussing last night's arrests, detectives trading stories over coffee, the ambient noise of phones and keyboards. Lydia remained focused, though a sense of isolation settled over her. She knew that sharing the book with anyone without preparation could be dangerous. People were not ready for what it contained, not in terms of comprehension, not in terms of mental fortitude. She had considered confiding in her partner, Detective Mark Renshaw, but the memory of the creature's eyes made her hesitate. Could she even explain it in words without sounding insane? She closed the book briefly, resting her forehead against the cover, feeling the faint hum once again, and took a deep breath. She needed to connect the dots, to see patterns, to understand the reason these disturbances were happening now. Why this church? Why this city? Why her? Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft knock on the evidence room door. Lydia. You in here? The voice was familiar. Mark, her partner, carrying a mug of steaming coffee, eyebrows furrowed in concern. She hesitated before responding. Yeah, Mark. Come in. He stepped inside, eyes immediately drawn to the book on the table. Whoa, what's that? His tone carried equal parts curiosity and apprehension. Lydia swallowed hard. I found it last night. At the church. You remember the report from that historian? It's more than a report. It's something else. Mark leaned over, eyes scanning the cover, the edges, the worn leather. Looks old. And heavy. You think it's a relic or? He stopped, noting the subtle vibrations she had mentioned. Okay, that's weird. She nodded, her voice trembling slightly. It's not just weird, Mark. There's something in this book, in that church, something alive. And it's been living proof of I don't know what, but it's systematic. Every incident, every sighting, it all connects. And last night, I saw it. The creature. It was not human. I think it's tied to the symbols in this book. To something older than anything we've ever encountered. Mark studied her, a mix of skepticism and concern in his eyes. All right. You've always had a taste for the weird cases, but this sounds insane. Lydia shook her head. I know it does. I don't expect you to believe me yet. But I saw it, Mark. I heard it. The whispers. It can manipulate perception. And the book, if you read it, it's like it's alive. The symbols move. They change. Mark's face went pale as he considered her words. He had been with her through many investigations, had seen her chase ghosts, criminals, and anomalies that defied conventional explanation, yet something in her tone, in the intensity of her eyes, made him pause. Okay. I'll bite. Let's say you're telling the truth. What do we do with it? Lydia exhaled slowly, thinking. We document everything. We investigate every claim, every sighting. We trace the origins of this book, the church, the symbols. And we stay alive while doing it. That's the first step. Then we try to understand what it wants. Mark nodded slowly, the weight of the situation settling on him. All right. But we need help. If this is as dangerous as you say, we can't handle it alone. Lydia agreed, and together they began to formulate a plan. They would start with historical records, old police reports, local newspapers, anything that could provide context. Every clue, no matter how small, could lead them closer to the truth. Days passed. Lydia and Mark spent hours poring over archives, photographs, and faded manuscripts. The book seemed to resist their efforts, as though it were aware of their scrutiny. Symbols shifted subtly, paragraphs rearranged themselves, diagrams evolved. Yet patterns began to emerge. The disturbances, they realized, were not random. They occurred on dates aligning with celestial events, often tied to lunar eclipses or the position of distant stars. Locations were specific, usually abandoned or historically significant buildings. And the victims, those who had glimpsed the entity, were all individuals who had witnessed events beyond the comprehension of normal society, people sensitive to the supernatural. The pattern was chilling. It suggested a deliberate intelligence, one that had been orchestrating these events for decades, perhaps centuries. One evening, as they worked late in the precinct library, a new report arrived. A local family had experienced an unusual phenomenon in their home. Objects moved on their own, strange symbols appeared on walls, and members of the household reported hearing whispers in a language none could understand. Lydia and Mark rushed to the scene. The house was eerily quiet when they arrived, the air thick and heavy. Furniture was overturned, and scrawled symbols marked the walls. The family, huddled together in the living room, looked terrified. Lydia recognized the telltale signs immediately, the same energy, the same aura she had felt in the church. She opened the book on her tablet, referencing the corresponding symbols, and a chill ran down her spine. The markings on the wall matched exactly. Lydia knelt beside the family, her voice calm but firm. We are here to help. I need you to tell me everything, every sound, every movement, every feeling you had since this started. As they spoke, she noticed the subtle changes in the environment, shadows shifting against logic, a cold draft that seemed localized, and faint whispers just beyond comprehension. She scribbled notes feverishly. This wasn't a random haunting, this was communication. An attempt to convey information. And somewhere within that communication lay the proof that the entity was real, proof of its intentions, proof that the world was on the brink of encountering something far older and more dangerous than humanity could comprehend. By the time night fell again, Lydia and Mark were exhausted but determined. The book lay open between them, pages illuminated by the soft glow of a desk lamp. Symbols pulsed faintly, casting a subtle glow on the walls of the temporary safe house they had arranged. "We're in deeper than I thought," Mark muttered, rubbing his eyes. Lydia nodded, staring at a diagram that depicted the convergence of celestial and terrestrial points. "Yes. And this is just the beginning. The Satan files, they're not just records. They're instructions. Warnings. Revelations. And if we don't follow them carefully, if we misinterpret even a single detail, the consequences could be catastrophic." Outside, the wind howled through the empty streets, carrying faint whispers that seemed to echo Lydia's own thoughts. She shivered but felt a grim determination harden within her. She had glimpsed the darkness, faced it, and survived. Now, she had a purpose beyond mere survival. She would uncover the truth behind the Satan files, document the evidence, and confront the entity that had haunted humanity for centuries. But she knew, deep down, that this journey would not only challenge her mind and courage, it would challenge her very soul. As she and Mark prepared for the long nights ahead, Lydia felt the book's presence, subtle yet insistent, like a pulse beneath her fingertips. She opened it once more, tracing a symbol that seemed to shimmer more vividly than before. A whisper curled around her consciousness, barely audible but unmistakable: "The proof is out there. Seek it. Understand it. Or be consumed by it." She met Mark's eyes, and in that silent exchange, they both understood the weight of the task ahead. The Satan files had revealed themselves, and there was no turning back. The next morning brought no relief. The city was alive with the usual noise, traffic honking, people rushing to their routines, oblivious to the unseen horrors that lurked in shadows, yet for Lydia, each sound was like a distant echo of the previous night's darkness. She sat at the small, improvised workspace they had established in Mark's apartment, the book open before her, its pages illuminated by the pale morning light filtering through the blinds. She traced the symbols again, over and over, hoping to find a thread, a clue that might indicate the entity's purpose. Mark leaned back in the chair across from her, rubbing his temples. "I've reviewed the locations, the disturbances, everything we've recorded so far," he said, his voice tight with exhaustion. "There's a pattern, yes, but it's convoluted. Every site seems unrelated on the surface, yet somehow connected. And the dates, they follow no conventional calendar. It's almost as if the events are tied to some ancient rhythm we've lost understanding of." Lydia nodded, eyes fixed on a diagram depicting a series of intersecting pentagrams overlaid with star charts. "That's what I've been thinking. The book isn't just a record, it's a map. A map of influence, of power, of something we haven't fully comprehended yet. The entity isn't bound to one location, it moves. It communicates through symbols, through actions, through events. It's leaving us a trail, Mark. It wants us to see it, to understand, but at the same time, it's testing us." Mark's gaze dropped to the book, hesitant but fascinated. "Tested or taunted, Lydia? There's a fine line between guidance and trap when dealing with something like this. And I'm not sure which side of that line we're on." The day passed in a blur of research. They combed through historical archives, looking for anything that could explain the pentagrams, the runes, the celestial alignments. Newspapers from decades ago told of mysterious fires, disappearances, and sightings, often dismissed as folklore or hysteria. Old police reports contained cryptic entries, unknown symbols found. Victim reports voices in languages unknown. Mental state unstable. Every clue seemed to point toward a sinister intelligence operating in the shadows, one with patience measured in centuries rather than years. By evening, fatigue had etched deep lines across their faces, yet neither could pull away from the investigation. The book, always present, pulsed faintly on the table, an almost imperceptible heartbeat of ink and energy. As night fell, they decided to revisit one of the locations detailed in the book, a long-abandoned mansion on the outskirts of the city. The mansion had been empty for decades, its windows boarded, paint peeling, roof sagging under the weight of neglect. Yet the book indicated this site as significant, the intersection of ruins, the confluence of celestial markers, and the site of several historical disturbances. Lydia and Mark approached cautiously, flashlights cutting through the darkness, shadows dancing along the cracked walls. Every instinct screamed at them to turn back, but they pressed forward. The front door yielded easily to their combined effort, creaking loudly as it swung inward. Inside, the air was thick, musty, tinged with the faint metallic scent of something older, something unearthly. The mansion's interior was a labyrinth of corridors, rooms filled with broken furniture, dust, and debris. Yet, in the center of the main hall, a pattern had been scrawled across the floor, symbols in a strange, reddish substance that glimmered faintly in their flashlight beams. Lydia knelt, recognizing the shapes immediately, another pentagram, surrounded by the looping runes from the book. Her pulse quickened, the hair on her arms rising. "It's like a mirror of the book's diagrams," she whispered. Mark stepped closer, shining his light on the markings. "And it looks fresh. Someone, or something, did this recently." Suddenly, a cold wind swept through the hall, extinguishing their flashlights. Darkness enveloped them, and a whispering began, low and indistinct at first, growing steadily louder. The words were unintelligible, yet the tone conveyed menace, curiosity, and amusement simultaneously. Lydia felt a pressure in her skull, an invasive sensation that made thinking difficult, but she gritted her teeth and focused on the symbols beneath her hands. "We need to document this," she said through clenched teeth. "We need to see the patterns, understand the flow." Mark fumbled with his flashlight until it flickered back to life, revealing a figure in the corner, a humanoid shape, twisted, elongated, shadows pulling at its feet. Its face was obscured, yet the darkness seemed to drip from it, saturating the air with dread. "You see now," the entity whispered, its voice a blend of multiple tones, overlapping, omnipresent. "The proof is not a gift. It is a burden. You follow, you learn, you suffer. Yet still, you seek it." Lydia froze, but instinctively reached for her camera, snapping photos. The flash illuminated the figure briefly, revealing eyes black as void, reflecting not light, but depthless nothingness. Mark raised his weapon, but the creature shifted, bending reality itself. The bullets passed through as if fired at smoke. The whispers intensified, curling around their minds, tempting, warning, and promising revelation. "Why are you doing this?" Lydia demanded, voice strong despite the tremor beneath it. "What is your purpose?" The shadows pulsed, responding in patterns that resonated with the pentagrams below. "Purpose is a human concept," it said. "We exist beyond your measure. Proof is the thread you follow, the lens through which you perceive what you cannot yet comprehend." Lydia realized that every detail mattered, the angles, the spacing, the direction of the symbols. She traced a path with her finger along the floor, murmuring calculations, measurements, and alignments to herself. Mark watched, torn between fear and fascination. Slowly, Lydia began to see the pattern, the symbols aligned with celestial bodies, as if forming a bridge between the human and the otherworldly, a network that transcended time and space. "It's a map," she whispered, "a bridge. It wants us to understand the connections, the intersections." The figure tilted its head, responding with a ripple through the shadows, as if acknowledging her realization. Hours passed in the mansion, though time felt distorted, elastic. Every attempt to move, to speak, to think, was influenced by the presence surrounding them. Yet the book remained their anchor, its pages open to diagrams mirroring the floor. Lydia copied notes, sketches, and measurements, careful to preserve a record of every anomaly. Each revelation came with a price: mental fatigue, disorientation, an annoying sense of exposure to a reality far older and more indifferent than humanity. Eventually, as the first hint of dawn broke through the boarded windows, the figure receded, fading into shadows that seemed to drain back into the walls themselves. The whispers lingered, soft, almost contemplative. Lydia and Mark were left in silence, hearts pounding, hands shaking, and minds buzzing with the enormity of what they had witnessed. The mansion seemed dead again, hollowed, yet they knew it would not remain quiet for long. Exiting the mansion, Lydia felt the weight of the book in her hands, the pages now warm to the touch. "We need to map this," she said, voice resolute. "Every sight, every symbol, every event. Only then can we begin to understand the full scope of what we are dealing with." Mark nodded, the magnitude of their task finally settling on him. "And we're just scratching the surface." Back at the safe house, they spread out maps, historical documents, and photographs. A web began to form, intricate and sprawling, connecting centuries of unexplained events. Every line, every dot, every symbol they traced reinforced a terrifying truth: the entity was methodical, deliberate, patient, and intelligent. It had been influencing human perception, recording events, leaving proofs, and preparing for something beyond human comprehension. As the night deepened, Lydia opened the book once more, tracing the symbols that pulsed faintly in response to her touch. A new sentence had appeared, one she did not recall seeing before: "The veil thins. Those who seek shall see. Those who see shall be marked. The proof is coming." Her blood ran cold, yet her determination only solidified. The Satan files were no longer a mystery to be observed, they were a mandate to be deciphered. Outside, the city slept unaware, the first stars of night gleaming faintly above. But Lydia and Mark were awake, eyes fixed on the maps and diagrams, hands shaking but precise, hearts burdened with the weight of knowledge. The proof was out there, and they had begun to follow its trail, a path lined with shadows, whispers, and revelations that could unmake the world they thought they knew. Somewhere in the darkness, the entity watched, its attention focused, its purpose unfolding in a rhythm as ancient as time itself. The Satan files were only beginning to reveal themselves, and Lydia knew with absolute certainty that there would be no turning back. Each page, each symbol, each encounter brought them closer to truths humanity was never meant to confront. And yet, despite the fear, the exhaustion, and the creeping madness, she pressed forward, compelled by the promise, or the curse, of knowledge that waited just beyond the veil of the visible, waiting for those brave, or foolish, enough to seek it. The night air was dense with foreboding as Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw drove toward the next location marked in the book, a small, dilapidated observatory perched atop a hill on the outskirts of the city. The building had been abandoned for decades, its telescopes covered in dust, its once polished brass fittings now tarnished and corroded. Yet the book insisted that the site held significance, a point of intersection between celestial alignments and historical disturbances. Lydia's fingers drummed nervously against the steering wheel, her mind cycling through every encounter with the entity so far. Shadows, whispers, shifting symbols, the pulsing of the book, it all led here, though the reason remained elusive. Mark, silent beside her, occasionally glanced at her face, reading the tension there. He had learned to trust her instincts, even when logic failed, and tonight, he could feel the intensity of her resolve, the way her eyes burned with a mixture of fear and purpose. They arrived at the observatory as the last light of dusk faded, leaving the structure cloaked in darkness, its silhouette jagged against the night sky. The front gate was rusted, and the path leading up to the entrance was overgrown with weeds and thorny vines. Every step toward the building seemed to echo unnaturally, as though the very ground resented their intrusion. Lydia led the way, flashlight beams slicing through the shadows, revealing cracks in the stone walls, broken glass, and scattered debris. The door resisted for a moment, then swung open with a loud groan, revealing the circular interior, dust motes floating in the air like tiny specters. Inside, the observatory was eerie and silent, save for the faint hum of something beyond perception. The telescope, pointed toward the heavens, seemed to quiver slightly as if aware of their presence. Lydia moved closer, scanning the floor. Her flashlight revealed symbols etched into the stone in an arrangement that mirrored the book's diagrams, pentagrams, interwoven runes, and celestial markers aligned precisely. "It's following a pattern," she murmured. "Everything we've seen, every disturbance, is part of this network. The entity is mapping something." Mark crouched beside her, examining the symbols. A network of what? Power? Influence? Fear? Lydia traced a finger along one of the lines connecting the pentagrams. "It's both, and more. It's communication, instruction, and control. And it's ancient. Older than any record we have." Suddenly, a cold gust swept through the room, extinguishing their flashlights. Darkness enveloped them completely, and the air thickened, carrying a faint metallic scent. Whispers began, low and serpentine, curling around their minds, repeating fragmented phrases: seek, see, understand, follow. Lydia felt her heart race, each beat syncing with the pulsing energy she felt from the book in her backpack. She steadied herself, taking deep breaths, and slowly turned to retrieve the book. As she did, a shadow detached itself from the far wall, fluid and undulating, its form vaguely humanoid but distorted, elongated. Its eyes, void black, infinite, met hers, and the whispers intensified. "You've come far," it hissed, voice layered with multiple tones, overlapping and resonating deep within the skull. "Few persist to this stage. Few understand. The proof is not a gift, it is a burden. And yet, you seek it willingly." Lydia held the book tightly, forcing her voice to remain steady. "We need to know. What is this? Why are you leaving these proofs? What is your purpose?" The entity tilted its head, shadows rippling around it. "Purpose is irrelevant. Proof is the lens through which mortals glimpse truth. You are marked to perceive, to follow the path. The pattern unfolds. The veil thins. Those who see, act. Those who act, are consumed or enlightened." Mark swallowed hard. Consumed or enlightened, which one are we aiming for? The shadows pulsed around them in response, almost as if mocking his question. Lydia opened the book, the pages glowing faintly under her touch. Symbols and diagrams shifted, rearranged themselves, as though reacting to the presence of the entity. She traced a series of lines, connecting celestial points, observing intersections that mirrored the etchings on the floor. "It's a map of influence, not just on Earth," she whispered. "It spans centuries, locations, even minds. Every site we've investigated, every symbol, every event, it's all connected, like a lattice. And the entity moves within it, orchestrating occurrences, leaving clues, guiding those who are sensitive." The whispers became almost articulate, teasing thoughts and images into her mind, visions of fire, darkness, and shadows stretching infinitely across landscapes, cities, and the night sky. She staggered, gripping the book, fighting to maintain focus. Hours passed in tense silence as they documented every mark, every observation, every faint impression left by the entity. The air remained thick, oppressive, yet the knowledge they gained felt critical, like pieces of a puzzle that could, if fully understood, reveal the nature of the darkness they confronted. Every line in the book, every pattern on the floor, was a key to understanding the proof, the hidden reality the entity had been preserving and exposing selectively for centuries. Mark made careful notes, recording observations, and taking photographs. "We're uncovering something immense," he said quietly. "Something humanity hasn't been ready for. But the more we understand, the more dangerous it feels." A sudden movement caught Lydia's attention. The telescope, long since inoperative, creaked and shifted on its mount, as though directed by an unseen hand. The eyepiece pointed toward a particular star cluster, one faintly marked in the book with a symbol she had not yet understood. A cold dread ran through her veins as she realized the entity's attention was precise, almost sentient in its coordination. She peered through the telescope, trying to steady her shaking hands. The stars above appeared normal at first, yet she began to perceive a pattern, a network of lights, subtle shifts, and alignments that corresponded to the diagrams in the book. It was as if the heavens themselves were part of the lattice, a cosmic blueprint that she and Mark were only beginning to decipher. The whispers coalesced into a single voice, a command this time: "Trace the lattice. Follow the path. Understand the convergence. The proof awaits where time and space intersect." Lydia's mind reeled, struggling to comprehend the magnitude of the directive. Time and space intersected in ways she had never studied, in ways forbidden by normal science. Yet the book, the symbols, the events, they all pointed toward the possibility that the entity was revealing a hidden dimension of reality, one that required both courage and intellect to navigate. Exhausted but driven, Lydia and Mark continued their work until the first light of dawn breached the horizon, washing the observatory in pale gold. The entity had withdrawn for now, leaving only residual energy and the lingering sense of being observed. They gathered their notes, photographs, and the book, carefully storing everything for analysis. Each observation, each measurement, each insight was a step deeper into a world that humanity had largely ignored, a world where proof and perception intertwine in dangerous ways. Back at their safe house, Lydia traced a series of connections on the map, linking the observatory to other historical sites, churches, and disturbances across the region. "Every site is a node," she said. "Every symbol, every alignment, every event, it's part of a vast lattice. And this entity is moving within it, orchestrating the flow, leaving instructions for those who can perceive. The proof is there, Mark. It's out there, but we have to follow it carefully." Mark nodded, exhaustion and awe mingling in his expression. "And we're far from done," he said. "Every node we visit, every symbol we decipher, it's like we're piecing together something immense, something that's been centuries in the making." Night fell again, and the city beyond remained oblivious to the unfolding events. But Lydia and Mark, eyes heavy yet unyielding, felt the presence of the entity in subtle ways, the whisper of wind, the shift of shadows, the faint pulse of energy emanating from the book. Each sensation reinforced their understanding that the Satan files were not merely records, they were a living framework, a guide, and a warning. They had begun to trace the lattice, to follow the patterns, and to understand the convergence. But with each revelation came a growing awareness of the dangers. The entity was patient, cunning, and infinitely aware, and missteps could have consequences beyond comprehension. As Lydia closed the book for the night, a final, chilling whisper echoed in her mind, soft yet unrelenting: "The convergence approaches. Seek the final nodes. Prepare for revelation. The proof is out there, and those who follow shall face it. She felt a shiver run down her spine, the weight of the words pressing against her consciousness. The Satan files were no longer a mystery, they were a mandate, a summons, and a challenge that demanded courage, intellect, and unyielding determination. And Lydia, despite every fear, every doubt, and every warning, knew she would answer that call. The following days blurred into a relentless cycle of research, fieldwork, and sleepless nights. Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw had settled into a rhythm dictated not by the conventional constraints of time, but by the pulsing instructions encoded in the book and the residual whispers that haunted them at every turn. The map of disturbances had grown denser, every historical anomaly, abandoned site, and celestial alignment meticulously charted. Yet each new connection revealed deeper layers of complexity. Patterns emerged, but the significance of the lattice, the interweaving network of symbols, events, and alignments, was still shrouded in mystery. They were no longer merely following leads, they were tracing a blueprint of a hidden reality, a reality that had existed beneath the surface of human perception for centuries. One evening, Lydia received an encrypted email from an anonymous sender claiming knowledge of the Satan files. The message contained a single image, a faded photograph of a cathedral that had burned down decades ago, its spire twisted as if reaching toward an unseen dimension. Scrawled in the margins were symbols identical to those in the book, along with a note. The notes converge. The proof is near. Seek the chamber where shadows dwell. Lydia's pulse quickened. She showed the image to Mark, whose brow furrowed in concern. That's the St. Hilaire Cathedral, he said quietly. It burned in the 1970s. The fire was never solved, bodies lost, records destroyed. No one survived to tell the story. How did someone get a picture of it? Lydia's eyes narrowed. It's not just a picture. The symbols match the book. The entity, or whoever left this, wants us to go there. It's another node, Mark. Another point in the lattice. They spent the next day preparing for the journey. Supplies, protective gear, recording equipment, and the book itself were packed carefully. Lydia could feel the book's pulse in her backpack, a subtle thrum that synchronized with the rhythm of her heartbeat. The ride to the cathedral was quiet, the city gradually giving way to rural roads lined with skeletal trees and mist-shrouded fields. The air seemed to grow heavier as they approached the site, as though the environment itself was aware of the impending intrusion. The cathedral's remains were imposing, even in ruin. Charred stone walls rose jaggedly, remnants of once grand arches and stained glass, while blackened beams jutted skyward. A faint glow emanated from the interior, almost imperceptible, as if the building itself retained a memory of its former life and the energy that had been summoned within. Inside, the cathedral was a maze of shadows and ruin. Broken pews, scorched tapestries, and collapsed ceilings created treacherous footing. Lydia traced the floor with her flashlight, immediately recognizing patterns etched into the charred stone. Pentagrams intertwined with celestial diagrams, looping runes carved into the remnants of altar steps. She felt a familiar pressure at the base of her skull, a prelude to the whispers that would soon follow. Mark moved cautiously, flashlight scanning every corner, every shadow. I feel it, he whispered. The same presence from the mansion, the observatory, the church is here, stronger. Lydia knelt to examine a particularly intricate symbol on the altar platform. Her fingers traced the grooves, and the book, lying open on a nearby pew, pulsed in response. The whispers began almost immediately, faint at first, then escalating, overlapping in multiple tones that pressed against their minds. The entity's presence was palpable, coalescing into a humanoid form in the far end of the nave. Its black void eyes fixed on Lydia, the shadows of the cathedral seeming to swirl toward it, drawn into a living tide of darkness. You persist, it said, voice layered and omnipresent. Few continue past the threshold. Few understand the lattice. You are chosen to witness the notes converge, to follow the path to the chamber where shadows dwell. Mark steadied himself, weapon drawn, though the creature's power seemed beyond mere physical confrontation. "Lydia, this is bigger than anything we've faced," he muttered. She nodded, gripping the book, determination hunting with every pulse of energy. "I know. And we have to see it through. We've come too far to turn back now." They moved toward the center of the cathedral, guided by the shifting symbols on the floor and the subtle glow of the book. Each step felt surreal, time stretching and contracting unpredictably. The whispers painted visions in Lydia's mind: fire, ash, darkness, and glimpses of entities moving through human history, shaping events, leaving proofs, testing perception. Every vision was vivid yet fragmented, impossible to fully comprehend, yet undeniably connected to the lattice they were tracing. Finally, they reached the rear of the cathedral, where a collapsed floor revealed a subterranean chamber. The air was colder here, thick with an unnatural humidity that carried faint whispers of voices long dead. The chamber walls were etched with symbols that matched those in the book, but their arrangement suggested purpose, a ritualistic blueprint, precise and deliberate. In the center, a shallow depression in the stone floor pulsed faintly, as if something lay beneath, waiting to be revealed. Lydia approached cautiously, book in hand, tracing her fingers along the lines on the stone. The symbols responded, glowing softly, as if acknowledging her touch. "You feel that?" Mark whispered. "It's like the energy is alive." Lydia nodded. "It is alive. And is aware of us. Every note we've touched, every symbol we've traced, it's all part of a network. This chamber is a nexus, a convergence point. The proof is here." The shadows shifted, coalescing into a humanoid shape once again. Its voice echoed from every corner simultaneously, now more intelligible, almost instructive. "The chamber marks the intersection of mortal perception and the lattice of truth. You are close to understanding, yet comprehension demands sacrifice. Proceed carefully, witness, or be consumed." Lydia took a deep breath and opened the book fully, tracing diagrams that mirrored the chamber's etchings. Mark illuminated each line with his flashlight, documenting measurements, angles, and alignments. Every detail mattered. The lattice was intricate, requiring precision to interpret correctly. The book pulsed in response to her touch, a low, resonant trum that seemed to synchronize with the whispers. She whispered calculations aloud, noting intersections of celestial alignments, correlations with historical disturbances, and the subtle flow of energy throughout the chamber. Hours passed, though time felt suspended. Each discovery brought clarity, yet deeper complexity revealed itself. The chamber was not merely a repository of symbols, it was a living interface with the lattice, an access point to understand the entity's influence over centuries of events. The entity watched silently, its presence both oppressive and instructive, guiding them without physical interaction. As Lydia traced a final series of connections on the chamber floor, the whispers coalesced into a coherent phrase, the notes converge. The veil thins. Witness and document, for the proof shall shape the minds of mortals. Only the prepared endure. Mark exhaled shakily. This is beyond anything we imagined. We are not just uncovering events, we are interacting with a pattern that spans time, space, and perception. It's enormous. Lydia nodded, feeling the weight of responsibility settle upon her shoulders. And it's dangerous. Every step we take, every symbol we interpret, every note we document, it leaves a mark. The entity watches, tests, and records. We have to be precise, careful, and resolute. One misstep could unravel everything, or worse. The entity's form shimmered faintly in the corner, as if responding to her thoughts. The whispers faded, replaced by a low, continuous vibration that seemed to resonate through the stone walls of the chamber. Lydia and Mark documented the final symbols, photographs, and measurements, ensuring that every piece of evidence was preserved. The chamber pulsed faintly, acknowledging their diligence, but the tension remained, a subtle reminder that the lattice was far from fully understood. By the time they exited the cathedral, the first light of dawn painted the ruined spire in pale gold. The city beyond remained unaware of the events that had transpired, yet Lydia and Mark carried the knowledge, and the burden, of what they had witnessed. The nodes were converging, the lattice was unfolding, and the Satan files were revealing themselves in deliberate, calculated steps. Each revelation brought them closer to understanding, yet the path remained fraught with peril, uncertainty, and the constant presence of an intelligence older, patient, and infinitely aware. Back at the safe house, Lydia placed the book on the table, its pages pulsing faintly in the early morning light. "We've documented another node," she said, voice quiet but firm. "The convergence is progressing. The proof is out there, waiting. And we are part of it now, whether we like it or not." Mark nodded, exhaustion and awe etched into his face. "And there's no turning back. Every step, every node, every symbol, it's all connected. We've committed ourselves to this, fully and irrevocably." Outside, the city awoke to a new day, oblivious to the hidden lattice being traced beneath its surface. Yet Lydia and Mark remained awake, eyes scanning maps, symbols, and the glowing pages of the book. The Satan files were unfolding, revealing a world beyond human perception, a network of proof and influence that demanded courage, intellect, and unwavering determination. They had begun to witness the convergence, to trace the lattice, and to face the entity that orchestrated it all. And in the quiet hum of dawn, Lydia felt a grim resolve settle over her. The path ahead would be perilous, but she would follow it to the end, documenting every proof, confronting every shadow, and uncovering the truths humanity had been blind to for centuries. The whispers returned faintly, almost contemplative, as if acknowledging her resolve. "The proof is out there. Seek it. Understand it. Endure, witness, and record. The lattice unfolds, and those who follow shall see." Lydia closed her eyes briefly, feeling the weight of centuries pressing down upon her, and opened them again with determination. The Satan files were no longer merely a mystery, they were a mandate, a challenge, and a revelation. And she would answer it, no matter the cost. The days that followed the cathedral visit were filled with meticulous cataloging, cross-referencing, and sleepless nights that blurred into one another. Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw had transformed the small safe house into a chaotic hub of maps, photographs, historical documents, and glowing pages of the book. Each day they traced the lattice, charting connections between nodes, celestial alignments, and historical disturbances, yet each discovery only deepened the mystery. The entity's presence had become more subtle but no less pervasive. Shadows shifted unnaturally in the corners of rooms, whispers brushed at the edges of their consciousness, and the book pulsed as though aware of their proximity, guiding them in silent instruction. Lydia sometimes felt as though the book itself was alive, a sentient anchor tethered to an intelligence far older and infinitely patient. One morning, Lydia awoke to a faint vibration in the floor, a subtle tremor that made the hairs on her arms stand on end. Mark stood beside her, mumbling incoherently about dreams filled with dark corridors and eyes that never blinked. She rubbed her temples, trying to shake off the lingering sensation of the whispers from the previous night. The book lay open on the desk, glowing faintly, its symbols rearranging themselves as if anticipating her attention. She approached, tracing her fingers along the familiar lines, and felt the pulse intensify. The message was clear, the next note awaited, and it was imperative that they move swiftly. Their destination was a remote estate outside the city, a sprawling property long abandoned after a series of mysterious deaths in the late 1800s. Historical records indicated strange occurrences, sudden illnesses, unexplained fires, and cryptic symbols found etched into the walls by residents who vanished without explanation. The estate had long been shrouded in local legend, whispered about in taverns and town halls as a place cursed, haunted, and untouchable. Yet the book insisted this note was critical, a convergence point where celestial alignments intersected with historical anomalies. As they approached, the estate loomed against the twilight sky, its windows like hollow eyes staring down upon the road, its iron gates rusted and hanging precariously. The air was heavy with anticipation, carrying the faint metallic scent of something long dead but not yet gone. Inside the estate, the decay was almost suffocating. Collapsed ceilings, overturned furniture, and scorched carpets created a maze of obstacles. The floorboards groaned underfoot, echoing through the cavernous halls. Yet the symbols etched into the stone, charred but unmistakable, drew them forward. Pentagrams intertwined with looping runes, celestial markers aligned perfectly, and energy seemed to hum beneath their fingers when they traced the lines. Lydia felt a familiar pressure at the base of her skull, a prelude to the whispers that would soon erupt. "We're close," she murmured. "I can feel it. This note is like the cathedral, but older, denser, more deliberate." Mark shone his flashlight across the room, illuminating symbols and diagrams that resonated with the book's pages. "The lattice is expanding," he whispered. "Every note we touch, every symbol we document is building something beyond our understanding." As they moved deeper into the estate, the shadows thickened, almost tactile, curling around their feet, climbing walls, and pulling in corners. The whispers emerged, faint at first, then growing in intensity, overlapping in a chorus of indistinct tones. Lydia felt her pulse quicken, every nerve screaming both fear and exhilaration. The entity's presence coalesced in the far corner of the main hall, a humanoid silhouette, elongated, fluid, void black eyes absorbing the dim light. It observed them silently, its presence suffocating yet almost instructive. "Few endure to this stage," it said, voice layered and omnipresent. "The lattice demands understanding, persistence, and sacrifice." The notes converge. "Witness and document, or falter and be consumed." Lydia gripped the book tightly, taking a deep breath to steady herself. "We will endure," she said firmly. "We are following the lattice. We are documenting the notes. And we will understand." The entity shifted slightly, shadows rippling around it in response, acknowledging her determination. Mark stepped forward, documenting every symbol, measuring every alignment, and photographing the intricate designs. Each detail mattered, the lattice required precision, and even a single error could have consequences beyond comprehension. Hours passed as they catalogued the note, their work illuminated by the faint glow of the book and the flashlights cutting through shadows. The whispers evolved, forming coherent phrases, almost as if teaching, guiding, yet taunting. "Time bends. Space aligns. Witness the intersection. The proof manifests where the lattice touches mortal perception." Lydia felt a rush of comprehension, recognizing alignments and connections that span centuries, locations, and events. The estate, once a forgotten relic, revealed itself as a nexus point, a place where human history intersected with the entity's influence. Suddenly, the shadows coalesced into a more defined form. The humanoid figure advanced slightly, and a low vibration resonated through the room, syncing with the pulse of the book. Lydia felt the energy coursing through her, almost tangible, pressing against her consciousness. The entity spoke again, more urgently, "The chamber of shadows awaits. The lattice nears convergence. Proof is coming. Witness, or be erased from its record." She shivered, understanding the gravity of the words. Every note documented, every symbol traced, brought them closer to revelation, yet also deeper into danger. Mark glanced at her, voice strained but resolute. "We're past the point of turning back. Every discovery, every pattern is like we're walking a path set long before we existed. And the entity, whatever it is orchestrating it all." Lydia nodded, eyes fixed on the symbols before her. "Yes. And we have to keep moving. Every note, every connection, every piece of proof we collect, it matters. It's all part of a larger design." The entity observed silently, its presence pressing against their minds, testing their resolve. As the night deepened, Lydia and Mark focused on the final chamber within the estate. The floorboards collapsed in places, revealing a subbasement that radiated energy, a cold that seemed almost sentient. Symbols etched into the stone glowed faintly, resonating with the book as Lydia traced each line with trembling fingers. The whispers became a rhythmic chant, guiding their attention to specific alignments, intersections of runes, and points where celestial markers would converge. Time seemed irrelevant, hours passed yet minutes felt like eternity. Finally, as dawn approached, a coherent pattern emerged. Lydia mapped the notes' connections to previous sites: the abandoned church, the mansion, the observatory, the cathedral. The lattice was no longer an abstract network, it was a living blueprint, a cosmic web that intertwined human history, celestial alignments, and supernatural influence. The entity remained at the periphery, shadows pulling around it like liquid darkness, watching, waiting. "The convergence is near," it intoned. "The lattice is complete. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall manifest, and the path of perception shall unfold." Exiting the estate, Lydia felt the weight of centuries in her hands, the pulse of the book a constant reminder of their task. The city beyond remained oblivious to the events unfolding in its shadows, yet the world itself was being subtly reshaped, guided by patterns humanity had long ignored. Lydia and Mark returned to the safe house, maps and notes in tow, understanding that every note, every alignment, every symbol was a piece of a puzzle that transcended time and space. Back in the quiet of their workspace, Lydia traced lines connecting the estate to other known nodes, the lattice now forming a sprawling web that spanned the region and beyond. "We're close to understanding the full design," she said, voice tight with awe and apprehension. "But every revelation comes with risk. The entity watches, tests, and records. One misstep could erase everything we've accomplished, or worse." Mark nodded, exhaustion and fascination mingling in his expression. "And the convergence is approaching. We have to prepare for whatever comes next. The proof is out there, and we are part of it now." As night fell again, the book pulsed faintly, whispers curling around Lydia's consciousness. The lattice unfolds. The notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall shape perception, and those who follow shall face it. Lydia closed her eyes briefly, feeling the enormity of their mission pressing down upon her. She opened them again with determination, knowing that the path ahead would demand courage, intellect, and unwavering resolve. The Satan files were revealing themselves in deliberate steps, and she was committed to following, documenting, and enduring until the ultimate truth was revealed. The days after the remote estate expedition were suffused with tension, the kind that gnawed at both mind and body. Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw moved through their routines like automata, cataloging every note, photograph, and symbol, while simultaneously preparing for the next note the book indicated. The patterns were becoming clearer, yet the lattice still eluded full comprehension. Each site, each alignment, each historical anomaly they investigated now seemed to ripple through the network they had begun to trace, as if the nodes were not just points on a map, but living conduits of energy, feeding into something larger than themselves. Lydia pored over the compiled data, her eyes scanning maps and diagrams that covered the walls of their safe house. Lines connecting nodes snaked across continents and centuries, linking events previously dismissed as unrelated. Fires, disappearances, visions, ancient texts, they all converged in ways that defied linear understanding. Mark, exhausted from days without proper sleep, looked over her shoulder. "It's massive," he said, voice hushed. "The scale of this is beyond anything human." Lydia nodded, tracing a faint line that connected a coastal lighthouse with a long-abandoned monastery deep inland. "And yet it's precise. Every event, every symbol, every disturbance is intentional. Someone, or something, is orchestrating this with patience and calculation measured in centuries." Their next target, the book suggested, was an abandoned lighthouse perched on a jagged cliff along the northern coastline. Historical records were sparse, yet local folklore spoke of strange lights seen far out to sea, mysterious disappearances of sailors, and inexplicable sounds echoing through the fog. The lighthouse, derelict for decades, was difficult to reach, perched precariously atop cliffs eroded by relentless winds and tides. As Lydia and Mark approached, the fog rolled in thick and white, obscuring the jagged rocks below and muting the sound of crashing waves. The air was cold, carrying a sharp tang of salt and an underlying metallic scent that Lydia had come to associate with the entity's presence. Inside, the lighthouse was a spiraling tower of stone, worn smooth by centuries of wind and neglect. Each step up the narrow staircase echoed unnaturally, amplifying the tension in Lydia's chest. Dust hung in the air like a shroud, disturbed only by their movements. The book pulsed faintly in her backpack, a silent heartbeat guiding her forward. At the top, the lantern room was nearly intact, its glass panes streaked with grime, the floor etched with symbols faintly illuminated by the moonlight filtering through. Pentagrams intertwined with runes, celestial markers, and unfamiliar glyphs formed a complex network across the floor, walls, and even ceiling. Lydia's pulse quickened. This node felt older than the others, its energy dense, almost suffocating. As she traced the symbols with her fingertips, the whispers began, low, serpentine, undulating in multiple tones that seemed to occupy both ears simultaneously. Mark shone his flashlight across the room, capturing the details for their records. The entity manifested in the shadows, a twisting humanoid figure with eyes void black, infinite in depth. It regarded them silently for a moment before speaking, voice layered and omnipresent. Few perceive the lattice at this depth. Fewer endure its convergence. You are close, yet the notes still hold secrets you are unprepared to grasp fully. Lydia opened the book and traced the lines corresponding to the lantern room's symbols. The pulsing grew stronger, resonating through her hands and up her arms. "The lattice is a living network," she murmured. "It's not just a map, it's an organism, a pattern of influence spanning time, space, and perception. Every node we document, every symbol we trace, it strengthens the network, but it also marks us. We are now part of it." Mark's expression was tense, a mixture of fear and awe. "And the entity is aware of us in ways we can't even measure. It's testing, teaching, and observing simultaneously." Hours passed as they carefully documented every symbol, every measurement, every alignment. The whispers became a rhythmic chant, almost instructional, guiding their attention to subtle patterns they might have missed. Lydia felt visions invade her mind, ships lost at sea, men and women vanishing, shadows moving just beyond perception. Each vision was fleeting yet vivid, imprinted with a sense of purpose, as if the events were orchestrated to communicate a truth she could barely comprehend. At the center of the lantern room, a circular depression pulsed faintly, echoing the patterns in the book. Lydia approached cautiously, hands trembling, and traced the symbols along its edges. The entity's presence intensified, shadows coiling and stretching toward her. "The chamber of observation is prepared," it whispered. "Witness the notes, endure the lattice, and understand the intersections. The proof approaches." Lydia felt a chill crawl up her spine, yet determination surged through her veins. She was driven by the need to see, to understand, to document, despite the cost. Mark adjusted his camera, capturing the intricate details of the symbols and the room's geometry. "It's almost as if the entire structure is a conduit," he said. "Not just a node, but a channel, a place where the lattice interfaces with the physical world. And the entity it moves through it." Lydia nodded, her eyes scanning the room. "Every node we've visited, every alignment we've recorded, it's all part of a network. The lighthouse is critical because it connects nodes across both time and space. And if the lattice converges here, the implications are staggering." The whispers evolved, forming coherent phrases that pressed directly into Lydia's consciousness. "Trace the pattern. Connect the nodes. Witness the convergence. The proof manifests where mortal perception intersects with the lattice. Endure, document, and understand, for those who falter are consumed." She shivered, feeling the magnitude of the words. The lattice was no longer an abstract concept, it was a force, a framework of reality she and Mark were actively participating in and observing simultaneously. Hours stretched into the night, each minute laden with tension. The entity watched, its shadows undulating around the lantern room, a silent presence that guided and tested without direct interaction. Lydia and Mark documented every detail, tracing lines, photographing symbols, measuring angles, and noting alignments with celestial markers. The lattice's complexity became increasingly apparent. It was not merely a map of locations or events, but a dynamic structure influencing perception, history, and reality itself. Finally, as dawn's first light crept through the grimy glass panes, a coherent pattern emerged. Lydia traced the lines connecting the lighthouse to the other nodes they had documented: the mansion, the observatory, the cathedral, and the remote estate. The lattice was no longer an amorphous network, it was a living design, a web spanning centuries, geography, and human experience. The entity remained at the periphery, shadows pulling around it like liquid darkness, observing, waiting, almost approvingly. "The convergence is approaching," it intoned. "The nodes are aligned. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall see." Lydia felt the weight of centuries pressing down on her consciousness, the pulse of the book syncing with the entity's presence. "We are ready," she whispered, voice firm, though her hands trembled. Mark nodded silently, understanding that readiness was a matter of courage, focus, and willpower, qualities that would be tested beyond measure in the coming notes. Descending the lighthouse, the fog had thickened, swirling in patterns that mirrored the symbols they had just documented. The air was alive with tension, as if the landscape itself recognized the importance of the node and the observers who had activated it. Every step back to the vehicle felt charged with the latent energy of the lattice, each shadow and whisper a reminder that the entity's attention remained on them. Back at the safe house, Lydia and Mark spread out the collected data, linking the lighthouse node to the previously documented nodes. The lattice was now a sprawling, interconnected web, visible in all its intricate detail for the first time. "Every node strengthens the network," Lydia said, tracing a finger across the map. "And we are participants now, witnesses and recorders. Every observation, Every measurement is part of the lattice itself. Mark exhaled, exhaustion and awe etched into his features. And the convergence is imminent. We've seen only a fraction, yet the implications are staggering. The proof is out there, waiting to reveal itself fully. As night fell again, the book pulsed faintly, whispers curling around Lydia's consciousness, soft yet unrelenting. The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall face it. Lydia closed her eyes briefly, feeling the magnitude of their mission pressing down upon her. Opening them again, she felt a grim resolve settle over her. The path ahead would demand courage, intellect, and unwavering resolve. The Satan files were revealing themselves in deliberate steps, and she was committed to following, documenting, and enduring until the ultimate truth was uncovered. The following week was a blur of preparation and mental recalibration. Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw had learned to respect the pattern, to anticipate the ways in which the lattice influenced not just locations, but their perception of time, space, and even thought itself. The safe house, once a simple workspace, had become a hub of intricate research, its walls covered in maps, symbols, photographs, and diagrams tracing centuries of events linked to the notes. Each connection they discovered made the web more complex, yet simultaneously more coherent. They could feel the lattice pulsing, responding to their observations, as though the book, the notes, and the entity were engaged in a continuous dialogue with them. The book had led them to a new site, a subterranean network of tunnels beneath the city, long sealed and forgotten. Historical accounts suggested that the tunnels had been used by secret societies in the 1700s for ritual purposes, yet later reports claimed they were cursed, inhabited by shadowy entities, and the site of disappearances. Modern construction had revealed hidden entrances, but authorities dismissed the claims as folklore. The book, however, indicated this site as a critical node where the lattice intersected with human activity, and the energy within was dense and dangerous. Lydia felt a tightening in her chest as they approached the entrance, a steel grate partially buried under debris, the smell of damp earth and decay rising in waves. As they descended into the tunnels, the air grew colder, heavier, charged with an energy that made the skin on their arms prickle. The flashlight beams carved jagged paths through the darkness, illuminating walls carved with symbols that mirrored the book, pentagrams, looping runes, celestial markers, and glyphs that seemed to shift subtly when viewed from different angles. Every note we've visited has felt alive, Lydia whispered, voice barely audible over the hum of energy around them. But this feels different. Older. More deliberate. More dangerous. Mark nodded, stepping cautiously, feeling the oppressive weight of unseen eyes. And the entity, it's here. I can sense it, in the air, in the shadows. Watching, testing, observing. They moved deeper into the tunnels, following a narrow passage marked with glowing symbols in the book. Every step seemed to echo unnaturally, reverberating in ways that made their senses question reality itself. Whispers began, low and serpentine, treading through their minds, overlapping in multiple tones, simultaneously familiar and alien. Lydia's pulse quickened. She felt the familiar pull of energy from the book, guiding her hands to trace the symbols etched into the walls. The lattice was here, in its purest form, a network of intersecting nodes, resonating through space and time, anchored by the convergence points they had been documenting. At the center of the tunnel network, they found a large chamber, its ceiling vaulted and adorned with symbols etched into the stone centuries ago. The air was thick, almost viscous, and charged with a faint vibration that resonated through the floor. Lydia stepped forward, hands trembling slightly as she traced the symbols. The book pulsed in response, its pages glowing faintly, echoing the patterns on the chamber walls. This node is immense, she whispered. It's not just a location. It's a nexus of influence, a conduit for the lattice itself. Every symbol here is connected to every node we've visited. It's orchestrated. Mark's flashlight illuminated shadowy figures in the far corners of the chamber, but when he focused, they vanished, leaving only darkness. It's the same presence, he murmured. The entity, it's everywhere, and nowhere. It's not just observing, it's guiding, testing, and perhaps teaching. The whispers intensified, becoming a complex rhythm of phrases and tones that pressed directly into their consciousness. Lydia felt visions intrude, scenes from centuries past, fires consuming buildings, strange rituals performed in secret, shadowy forms moving through history. Each vision was brief, yet vivid, reinforcing the network they were tracing. You feel that? Lydia asked. The chamber itself, it's alive. It reacts to us, to our observations. Each movement we make, each line we trace in the book, it responds. Mark nodded, eyes wide with both fear and fascination. The lattice, it's not static. It's dynamic, aware, and deliberate. And the entity, it exists within it, manipulating and observing simultaneously. Hours passed as they traced the intricate symbols, mapping the connections to previously documented notes, the mansion, the observatory, the cathedral, the lighthouse, and the remote estate. Each line, each alignment, each celestial marker revealed more of the lattice's structure, yet the full design remained just beyond comprehension. The entity remained at the periphery, shadows pooling around it like liquid darkness, observing without interference. The convergence nears, it whispered, voice layered and omnipresent. Witness, endure, and document. The proof manifests where the lattice touches mortal perception. Those who falter are lost. Lydia felt the enormity of their task pressing upon her. Each discovery was exhilarating yet terrifying, a reminder of the forces they were contending with. She traced a final series of connections on the chamber floor, aligning them with the book's diagrams. The symbols pulse in response, and the whispers coalesce into a coherent phrase. The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall see. Mark adjusted his camera, capturing every detail. This is more than a node, he said quietly. It's a central hub, a point where all previous nodes intersect. The convergence is no longer theoretical, it's happening. Lydia nodded, feeling a mixture of awe and dread. And we are part of it. Every observation, every measurement, every symbol we trace, it's as if we are integrated into the lattice itself. The entity watches, but it also relies on our participation. As night deepened, the chamber seemed to pulse with energy, a tangible force that pressed against their bodies, minds, and senses. The whispers continued, rhythmic and instructive, guiding their attention to subtleties they might have missed. Lydia documented every measurement, every alignment, every nuance of the symbols. The lattice was alive, complex, and vast, a web spanning time, space, and perception. Each node strengthened the network, and the convergence was drawing nearer, bringing with it revelations and dangers beyond human comprehension. Finally, as the first light of dawn seeped into the chamber through cracks in the stone, Lydia traced the last alignment, connecting the subterranean node to all others they had visited. The lattice, now visible in its sprawling complexity, revealed a pattern, an intricate web spanning continents, centuries, and dimensions of perception. The entity remained at the edge of shadows, silent yet omnipresent, observing their work. The proof approaches, it intoned. The notes are aligned. Witness, endure, and document. The convergence shall reveal truths beyond mortal understanding. Exiting the tunnels, the city above seemed unaware of the profound forces that had been stirred below. Lydia and Mark, however, carried the weight of centuries in their consciousness, the pulse of the book a constant reminder of their task. Each note, each symbol, each alignment had brought them closer to understanding, yet the path remained perilous, filled with uncertainty, and overseen by an intelligence that was patient, cunning, and infinitely aware. Back at the safe house, Lydia traced lines connecting the subterranean node to the others: the mansion, the observatory, the cathedral, the lighthouse, and the remote estate. The lattice was now a sprawling, living network, and their understanding of it was growing with each observation. "We are approaching the convergence," she said, voice tight with anticipation and dread. "Every node we visit, every symbol we trace, it matters. We are witnesses, participants, and recorders. And the entity is watching." Mark nodded silently, exhaustion and awe mingling in his expression. "And we have to be ready. The proof is out there, and the convergence is imminent." The whispers returned faintly, almost contemplative, curling around Lydia's consciousness. The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall see. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the magnitude of their mission pressing down on her. Opening them again, she felt a grim resolve settle over her. The path ahead would demand courage, intellect, and unwavering determination. The Satan files were revealing themselves deliberately, step by step, and she was committed to following, documenting, and enduring until the ultimate truth was revealed. The weeks that followed brought a relentless intensity to Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw's lives. Sleep had become a scarce commodity, meals were rushed or skipped, and their safe house was now a labyrinth of maps, photographs, and symbols that sprawled across walls and tables. The lattice was growing clearer, yet its full structure remained tantalizingly elusive. Each node they documented seemed to ripple through the network, sending subtle waves across the other points they had mapped. Lydia sometimes felt dizzy with the implications, the weight of centuries pressing upon her mind, yet the pull of the proof, the lure of understanding, kept her moving forward. The next node the book indicated was a ruined monastery hidden deep within a dense forest several hours from the city. Historical records were fragmented, mentioning strange disappearances of monks, unexplained fires, and whispered accounts of a shadowy presence that haunted the cloisters. Local legends spoke of rituals performed in secret, strange lights visible through the trees at night, and a curse that fell upon those who entered. The book insisted that this monastery was pivotal, a place where the lattice's influence had been particularly strong over the centuries, a convergence point connecting both the celestial alignments and historical disturbances. As Lydia and Mark approached the site, the forest thickened, the canopy above swallowing the sunlight and casting everything below into near darkness. The air was heavy with moisture and the scent of decaying leaves, and a subtle vibration ran through the ground, almost imperceptible but unmistakable to Lydia's trained senses. The ruins emerged through the fog, collapsed stone walls, overgrown gardens, and remnants of arched windows that once glowed with stained glass. Every step closer made the air feel denser, charged with an energy that made their skin tingle. "This place," Mark whispered, "it's alive in a way I can't explain." Lydia nodded. "It's the lattice. Every node we touch radiates its energy. And this one is particularly potent." Inside the monastery, the decay was profound. Broken beams, toppled statues, and shattered remnants of altars littered the floors. Yet symbols carved into the stones were unmistakable: pentagrams, intertwined runes, celestial markers, and complex glyphs, some familiar from the book, others entirely new. Lydia felt a tightening in her chest as she traced the carvings, the familiar pulse from the book in her backpack intensifying. The whispers began immediately, low and insidious, curling around her consciousness, overlapping in multiple tones, some soothing, others threatening. The entity manifested in the far cloister, shadows shifting to form a vaguely humanoid figure, its void black eyes observing. "You continue," it said, voice layered and omnipresent. "Few endure this deep into the lattice." The notes converge, yet comprehension remains elusive. Witness, document, and understand, or succumb to the patterns that lie beyond mortal perception. Lydia swallowed hard, gripping the book tightly. "We endure," she replied firmly, her voice trembling slightly. "We follow the lattice. We witness. We document. We understand as best we can." The entity shifted, the shadows flowing like liquid around it, acknowledging her resolve. They moved methodically through the monastery, documenting every symbol, measuring angles, photographing every glyph, and noting alignments with celestial markers indicated in the book. Each line, each curve, each mark held significance. The lattice was not merely a static map, it was dynamic, responsive, and alive, and the entity was an integral part of it. Hours passed, time stretching and contracting unpredictably, the whispers pressing into their minds, guiding their attention to subtle patterns they might have overlooked. In the monastery's central chamber, a large circular symbol dominated the floor, etched deeply into the stone. It pulsed faintly, resonating with the book in Lydia's hands. She approached cautiously, tracing the lines and aligning them with the diagrams within the book. The whispers coalesced into intelligible phrases: trace the network, connect the nodes, witness the convergence. Proof manifests where the lattice intersects mortal perception. Endure, record, and comprehend, for those who falter are lost. Mark illuminated the surrounding walls with his flashlight, capturing measurements, angles, and connections to other nodes. "Every node is reinforcing the lattice," he murmured. "And we're becoming part of it, integrated into its design." Visions began to intrude upon Lydia's consciousness, scenes from centuries past, monks performing rituals, fires consuming the monastery, shadowy forms moving through history, unseen yet deliberate. Each vision was brief, yet vivid, as if the events had been orchestrated to convey a specific truth. She staggered slightly, gripping the book to ground herself. "It's more than just energy," she said. "These notes, they are repositories of experience, memory, influence. The lattice is shaping reality, and we are witnessing it in fragments." The entity advanced slightly, its form rippling with shadow. "You approach the threshold," it intoned. "The lattice nears full convergence. Witness and document, endure, and the proof will reveal itself. Hesitate, falter, and the patterns erase you from history. Observe closely, for comprehension demands sacrifice." Lydia felt a chill run through her spine, yet her resolve hardened. "We will not falter," she whispered. "We've come too far, and the proof is out there. We will see it, understand it, and document it." Hours passed in a tense ritual of observation and recording. The central chamber seemed to pulse with a rhythm of its own, as if the entire structure were a living organism, responsive to their actions and their attention. The lattice's design became increasingly apparent, an intricate network of nodes, intersecting across time, space, and human perception, reinforced by energy, memory, and influence. Each documented node strengthened the network, bringing them closer to understanding the convergence. Finally, as dawn approached, Lydia traced the last alignment in the central chamber, connecting the monastery node to all others they had visited: the mansion, the observatory, the cathedral, the lighthouse, and the subterranean tunnels. The lattice, sprawling and complex, revealed patterns that transcended geography and chronology. The entity remained at the periphery, its shadows pooling like liquid darkness, observing their work with silent intensity. "The proof approaches," it whispered. "Notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The lattice manifests truths beyond mortal comprehension." Exiting the monastery, the forest was shrouded in mist, the first light of day muted and pale. Lydia and Mark felt the weight of their discoveries pressing upon them, the pulse of the book a constant reminder that their task was far from complete. Each note, each symbol, each alignment had revealed fragments of a truth that humanity had been blind to for centuries. The convergence was no longer theoretical, it was unfolding before them. Back at the safe house, they mapped the monastery node alongside all others, the lattice now an intricate, interconnected web of influence, memory, and energy. "Every observation strengthens the network," Lydia said, tracing the lines with her finger. "And we are now inseparable from it. We witness, we document, and we endure. The entity is aware, yet it relies on our participation." Mark nodded silently, exhaustion and awe etched into his features. "And the convergence is imminent. The proof is out there, and we are the witnesses chosen to see it." As night fell again, the whispers returned, curling around Lydia's consciousness with a persistent, insistent rhythm. The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall see. She closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the enormity of the task before her. Opening them again, she felt a grim resolve settle over her. The path ahead demanded courage, intellect, and unwavering determination. The Satan files were revealing themselves deliberately, step by step, and she was committed to following, documenting, and enduring until the ultimate truth was unveiled. The following days brought a tense quiet to Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw's lives. The rhythm of sleep, meals, and ordinary conversation had largely vanished, replaced by obsessive cataloging, map tracing, and long hours over the book and photographs of notes. The lattice had become more than a network to them, it was a living, pulsating structure, its intricate patterns visible only through their careful observation and documentation. Yet, despite the clarity they were achieving, the magnitude of the convergence weighed on them like a storm cloud waiting to break. Every symbol traced, every alignment recorded, every photograph taken brought them closer to comprehension, and closer to danger. The book had indicated their next destination with urgency, an ancient, half-ruined castle perched on the edge of a rocky valley. Legends surrounding the site were sparse but chilling, mentioning sudden disappearances of villagers, strange lights in the night sky, and sounds described as unnatural wailing that emanated from the castle's depths. Historical records hinted at secret societies and arcane rituals performed in hidden chambers beneath the castle, but most accounts were fragmentary, dismissed as folklore. The book marked the castle as a pivotal node, a site where the lattice had converged repeatedly over centuries, its energy dense and potent. Lydia felt a tightening in her chest as they approached, the pulse of the book intensifying with every mile. As they drew closer, the castle emerged through a morning mist, jagged towers silhouetted against a pale sky. Its stone walls were weathered and blackened by centuries of wind and rain, ivy crawling across every surface like a living tapestry. The main gate, heavy and rusted, groaned as they pushed it open, revealing a courtyard littered with broken statues, toppled fountains, and remnants of gardens long overgrown. Every step forward heightened the tension in the air, and the subtle hum of energy beneath their feet made the hairs on their arms rise. "It's incredible," Mark whispered. "The energy here is like nothing we've felt before." "The lattice is denser." Lydia nodded, her fingers brushing the cover of the book in her backpack. "And the entity it's watching, testing, guiding." This note is crucial. We need to document every detail, every alignment. Inside, the castle was a maze of decaying corridors, collapsed stairwells, and dust-choked rooms. Yet the symbols etched into the stone were unmistakable: pentagrams, looping runes, celestial markers, and unfamiliar glyphs that seemed to shift subtly when observed from different angles. Lydia traced her fingers along the carvings, feeling the pulse of the book synchronize with the energy in the walls. Shadows stretched and contracted unnaturally in corners, and the whispers began almost immediately, curling around their consciousness in multiple layers, some soothing, others menacing. The entity's presence coalesced in the grand hall, a humanoid figure sculpted from darkness, boy black eyes absorbing the dim light and fixing on them with unsettling intent. "You persist," it said, voice layered and omnipresent. "Few endure this deep into the lattice." Notes converge. Comprehension approaches, yet clarity remains elusive. Witness, endure, document, or be consumed by the patterns beyond mortal perception. Lydia swallowed hard, gripping the book tightly. "We endure," she whispered, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "We follow the lattice. We witness. We document. We understand as best we can." The entity shifted slightly, shadows rippling like liquid around it, acknowledging her resolve. They moved methodically through the castle, photographing every symbol, measuring every alignment, and noting connections to previous notes. The grand hall was particularly complex, its floor etched with an intricate series of intersecting circles and pentagrams, accented with celestial markings that corresponded precisely to diagrams in the book. The air was charged, every movement carrying an almost tangible weight. Lydia felt a shiver run down her spine as she traced a particularly detailed alignment, the book pulsing in her hands, guiding her along the paths encoded in the stone. Hours passed as they documented, mapped, and analyzed the room. The whispers evolved, forming coherent phrases that pressed directly into Lydia's consciousness. Trace the network. Connect the nodes. Witness the convergence. Proof manifests where the lattice intersects mortal perception. Endure, record, comprehend, and those who falter are erased. Mark adjusted his camera, capturing every nuance, every subtle shift of light and shadow. "The nodes we visited, each one strengthens the lattice," he murmured. "And we are now part of it. Integrated into the pattern." Lydia nodded, feeling a mixture of awe and dread. The entity relies on our observation, our endurance. We are participants as much as witnesses. In the castle's subterranean chambers, they discovered a central node, a large circular platform inscribed with an intricate series of glyphs, runes, and celestial symbols. It pulsed faintly, resonating with the book, as if acknowledging their presence. Lydia traced the symbols, aligning them with the diagrams within the book. The whispers coalesced into intelligible guidance. Witness the intersection. Endure the energy. Document the proof. The lattice approaches convergence. She felt visions intrude upon her consciousness, nights, rituals, fires consuming the castle, shadowy forms moving through centuries of history. Each vision was brief but vivid, reinforcing the connections they were documenting. The entity moved closer, shadows pooling around it like liquid darkness. "You approach the threshold," it intoned. "The notes converge. Witness and document. Endure, and the proof will reveal itself. Hesitate, falter, and the lattice erases your existence. Observe closely, comprehension demands sacrifice." Lydia felt a chill crawl up her spine, yet her determination hardened. "We will not falter," she whispered. "We've come too far. The proof is out there, and we will see it, understand it, and document it." Hours stretched into the night, the castle pulsing with a rhythm of energy that seemed to synchronize with their work. Lydia documented every line, angle, and glyph, tracing the connections to previously recorded notes: the mansion, observatory, cathedral, lighthouse, subterranean tunnels, and the monastery. The lattice's design became increasingly apparent, an intricate network spanning time, geography, and human perception, reinforced by memory and energy. Each documented node strengthened the network, drawing them closer to understanding the convergence. Finally, as dawnlight seeped through the cracked windows, Lydia traced the last alignment on the central platform, linking the castle node to all others they had visited. The lattice now revealed patterns that transcended both geography and chronology, a living web of energy, memory, and influence. The entity remained at the edge of shadows, observing silently, its presence both oppressive and instructive. "The proof approaches," it whispered. "Notes converge. Witness, endure, document. The lattice manifests truths beyond mortal comprehension." Descending the castle stairs, the valley below was shrouded in mist, the first light pale and diffuse. Lydia and Mark felt the weight of their discoveries pressing upon them, the book's pulse constant and insistent. Every note, every alignment, every observation had revealed fragments of a hidden reality, and the convergence was no longer a distant concept, it was unfolding before them. Back at the safe house, they mapped the castle node alongside all others. The lattice now sprawled across walls and tables like a living organism, its intricate design revealing connections across continents, centuries, and dimensions of perception. "Every observation strengthens the network," Lydia said, tracing a finger along the lines connecting the castle to the other nodes. "And we are now inseparable from it. Witness, document, endure, the entity observes, yet relies on our participation." Mark nodded, exhaustion and awe etched in his face. "The convergence is imminent. The proof is out there, and we are its witnesses." As night fell again, the whispers returned, curling around Lydia's consciousness with a persistent, insistent rhythm. "The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall see." She closed her eyes briefly, absorbing the enormity of their task. Opening them again, she felt a grim resolve settle over her. The path ahead demanded courage, intellect, and unwavering determination. The Satan files were revealing themselves deliberately, step by step, and she was committed to following, documenting, and enduring until the ultimate truth was revealed. The days following the castle expedition were charged with a restless energy. Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw found themselves moving through the world differently now, as though the lattice had not only intertwined with history but with their very perception of reality. Ordinary events seemed slightly off-kilter, shadows stretched too long, whispers lingered in empty rooms, and lights flickered in ways that suggested intentionality. Their safe house was no longer a mere workspace, it had become a nexus of observation, a command center for mapping and analyzing the web of nodes that spanned centuries, geography, and dimensions of consciousness. The book pulsed constantly, its glow a reminder that the entity's presence was never far. The next node the book had highlighted was the ruins of an ancient observatory atop a jagged plateau. Constructed in the early 1600s by a forgotten sect of astronomers and mystics, the observatory had been abandoned after a series of inexplicable deaths and disappearances. Local accounts were vague but chilling, speaking of strange lights, ethereal voices, and unnatural alignments that defied known astronomical patterns. The book insisted that this observatory was a central node, a place where celestial, historical, and supernatural energies converged in a manner crucial to understanding the lattice's full structure. Lydia could feel a tightening in her chest as they drove toward the site, the pulse of the book intensifying with every mile. Arriving at the plateau, the observatory loomed through a low-lying fog, its stone walls crumbling, towers fractured, and iron domes rusted and partially collapsed. Wind whipped across the plateau, carrying a sharp, metallic tang that made Lydia's skin prickle. The surrounding landscape was silent except for the distant cry of a hawk, and the air seemed electrically charged, vibrating with subtle currents of energy. "This note," Mark whispered, voice taut with awe, "it's different. Stronger. More deliberate. The lattice here is dense." Lydia nodded, feeling the weight of centuries pressing through the stone, the energy palpable in every surface, every corner. "And the entity is aware," she said. "It's guiding us to witness and document, to integrate this node into our understanding of the network." Inside, the observatory's spiral staircases and collapsed floors created a maze of hazards. Dust choked the air, disturbed only by their footsteps, and broken telescopes and instruments littered the floors. Symbols carved into the walls, ceilings, and floors were immediately recognizable: pentagrams, looping runes, celestial markers, and more complex glyphs, some entirely new. Lydia's pulse quickened as she traced the carvings, the book's glow intensifying with each alignment. Shadows stretched unnaturally along the walls, forming patterns that suggested movement, intent, and observation. The whispers began, low and serpentine, threading through their minds, overlapping in multiple tones, some coaxing, others warning. The entity manifested in the central chamber of the observatory, a tall, fluid shadow with void-black eyes that absorbed the dim light. "Few endure to this depth," it said, voice layered and omnipresent. The notes converge. Comprehension approaches, yet clarity remains incomplete. Witness, document, endure, or be subsumed by the patterns beyond mortal perception. Lydia gripped the book tightly. "We endure," she replied, voice steady. "We follow the lattice. We witness. We document. We understand as best we can." The shadow figure undulated slightly, acknowledging her determination without moving closer. Hours passed in meticulous documentation. Lydia and Mark measured every symbol, photographed each glyph, and traced alignments with celestial markers indicated in the book. The central chamber contained a circular platform of stone etched with overlapping pentagrams and celestial diagrams, glowing faintly as Lydia's fingers brushed over them. The whispers coalesced into intelligible guidance: trace the notes. Witness the convergence. Record the proof. The lattice manifests where mortal perception intersects with its design. Endure, and the truth reveals itself. Visions assaulted Lydia intermittently, astronomers of the past charting stars, rituals performed in secrecy, sudden fires consuming the observatory, shadows slipping through centuries. Each vision reinforced the network they were documenting, emphasizing the interconnectedness of history, perception, and the entity's influence. She staggered slightly, gripping the book to anchor herself. "This is more than just energy," she murmured. "The notes are repositories of memory, influence, and power. The lattice shapes reality itself, and we are witnessing it in fragments." Mark's camera captured each angle, each alignment, each subtle glow in the room. "The notes we've documented," he said quietly, "each one strengthens the lattice. And we're becoming part of it, woven into its pattern." Lydia nodded. "The entity relies on our observation, our endurance, our participation. We are both witnesses and instruments of the network." The night deepened, and the observatory seemed to pulse with its own internal rhythm, a living resonance that synchronized with their movements and attention. The entity moved closer, shadows pulling around it, its presence almost tangible. "You approach the final threshold," it intoned. "The notes converge. Witness and document. endure, and the proof will manifest. Hesitate, falter, and the lattice erases you from history. Observe closely, comprehension demands sacrifice. Lydia shivered, but her resolve strengthened. We will not falter, she whispered. The proof exists. We will see it, understand it, and document it. Hours pass in a tense, ritualistic observation. The circular platforms seemed to vibrate in response to Lydia's tracing, each glyph aligning with the diagrams in the book. Connections to previously documented notes became clear: the mansion, the cathedral, the lighthouse, the subterranean tunnels, the monastery, and the castle. The lattice's design revealed itself as an intricate web of energy, memory, and perception, spanning centuries and geography, reinforced by human observation and interaction. Each note documented was a thread in this living network, drawing them closer to the convergence. As dawn approached, Lydia traced the final alignment within the observatory, connecting this note to all others. The lattice now spanned continents and centuries with clarity, a living web of influence, energy, and perception. The entity lingered at the periphery, shadows pooling like liquid darkness, observing silently. The proof approaches, it whispered. Notes converge. Witness, endure, and document. The lattice manifests truths beyond mortal comprehension. Descending from the plateau, the surrounding landscape was quiet and still, shrouded in morning mist. Lydia and Mark felt the weight of centuries in their minds, the pulse of the book a constant reminder of their mission. Every observation, alignment, and documented symbol revealed fragments of a hidden reality, and the convergence was no longer theoretical, it was unfolding before them. Back at the safe house, they mapped the observatory note alongside all previously documented notes. The lattice now sprawled across walls and tables, intricate lines forming a complex web of interconnections across time, geography, and perception. Every observation strengthens the network, Lydia said, tracing lines connecting the observatory to the other nodes. We are inseparable from it now. Witness, document, endure, the entity observes but relies on our participation. Mark nodded silently. The convergence is imminent. The proof is out there, and we are the witnesses chosen to see it. As night fell, the whispers returned, curling around Lydia's consciousness. The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, document. The proof shall manifest, and those who follow shall see. She closed her eyes briefly, feeling the magnitude of their mission pressing down. Opening them again, she felt the grim resolve of someone standing at the edge of revelation. The path ahead demanded courage, intellect, and unwavering determination. The Satan files were revealing themselves deliberately, step by step, and she was committed to following, documenting, and enduring until the ultimate truth was unveiled. The night before their final expedition was thick with anticipation. Lydia Hayes and Mark Renshaw moved through the safe house silently, their exhaustion heavy but their determination unwavering. The lattice had grown in complexity and clarity with every note they had visited: mansion, cathedral, lighthouse, subterranean tunnels, monastery, castle, and observatory. Now, the book pointed toward a site that had eluded historical records, hidden, unmarked, yet central, a convergence point where all the previous notes intersected. Every pulse of the book, every whisper of the entity, seemed to press upon their minds with urgency. This was the culmination, the moment where the proof would finally manifest. The destination was an uncharted plateau deep within a remote mountain range. Local maps did not mark it, and the terrain was treacherous: jagged cliffs, narrow passes, and sudden drops hidden by mists that swirled like living entities. As they ascended, Lydia could feel the energy intensifying, the lattice vibrating underfoot. The whispers were now constant, layering over one another in tones and rhythms that resonated directly within her consciousness. Witness. Endure. Document. The notes converge. Proof manifests where mortal perception meets the lattice. Endure, or be erased. As they approached the summit, a vast stone structure emerged through the fog. It was unlike any architecture they had encountered, angular and labyrinthine, its surfaces covered in symbols both familiar and alien, etched deep into stone that seemed impossibly ancient. The air hummed with energy, sharp and sweet, pressing against their bodies and minds. Shadows twisted and moved independently of any light source, gathering in corners and recesses, occasionally forming shapes that hinted at humanoid figures, yet remained distinctly otherworldly. This is it," Lydia whispered, her voice trembling with awe. "This is the central node, the convergence point. Everything we've traced, every node, every alignment, it all leads here." Mark nodded, gripping his camera and measuring instruments tightly. "The lattice is denser than ever. The entity, it's here, fully present. We can feel its awareness in every shadow, every breath of wind." Inside the structure, the central chamber opened before them, a vast circular space with a dome ceiling so high that the shadows of the carvings above seemed to stretch into infinity. The floor was etched with an intricate network of pentagrams, celestial markers, and runes that intersected in patterns that aligned perfectly with the maps and diagrams they had painstakingly compiled. Each node they had visited was represented here, connected by lines of energy visible only to those attuned to the lattice. Lydia stepped forward, the book pulsing in her hands, almost as if it were alive, responding to the convergence itself. The whispers intensified, coalescing into a single voice that resonated through the chamber and within their minds. Witness. Endure. The notes converge. Observe the lattice. The proof manifests. Shadows rippled along the walls, forming shapes that were vaguely humanoid, yet impossible, elongated limbs, faces that seemed to shift when viewed from different angles, eyes that glowed with void-like blackness. Lydia felt a wave of vertigo, a sense that reality itself was bending, reshaping around the lattice. Mark illuminated the carvings and symbols with his flashlight, but the shadows did not respond to light. They moved independently, twisting and flowing around the etched lines on the floor. "The nodes are alive," he murmured. "Not just in energy, they interact, influence, and shape reality itself." Lydia traced the lines of the central pentagram with her fingers, aligning them with the book. The floor vibrated faintly beneath her touch, and the whispers became a coherent phrase. "The proof is beyond perception, yet within reach of those who endure. Witness the convergence. Document, or be consumed." Suddenly, the center of the chamber began to glow, faintly at first, then brighter, revealing an intricate network of energy lines stretching outward in all directions, connecting every symbol, rune, and marker. The lattice, fully revealed, was not just a map, it was a living organism, a framework of influence and perception spanning centuries, geography, and dimensions of human awareness. Lydia felt herself pulled into it, consciousness aligning with the lattice, her mind flooded with visions of all nodes, all events, all histories intertwined in a grand design. The entity materialized fully in the center of the chamber, a shifting shadow of immense scale, its presence simultaneously terrifying and awe-inspiring. "Few endure to witness this," it intoned. "The lattice converges. Proof manifests where observation and perception meet. You have documented, endured, and participated. Now, comprehend." Lydia and Mark stood trembling, the energy coursing through them, aligning their perception with the lattice itself. Images flooded their minds: the mansion, the cathedral, the lighthouse, tunnels, monastery, castle, observatory, all notes pulsating with energy, converging, overlapping, merging. Time and space seemed irrelevant. History folded upon itself in patterns that were at once chaotic and perfectly ordered. The central energy pulsed stronger, and Lydia realized that the lattice was not simply a network of locations, it was a record, a repository, a system of influence and proof encoded into reality. Every ritual, every disappearance, every inexplicable event had been part of its growth. And now, at the convergence, the proof was visible, a cosmic design underlying human experience, orchestrated through subtle influence, perception, and energy. The entity's voice resonated again. The proof is out there. Now you see it. Endure, witness, and comprehend fully. The knowledge demands acceptance and courage. Visions came faster, more intense. Lydia saw shadows moving across centuries, manipulating events, shaping outcomes. She saw people acting with free will, yet their choices nudged subtly by unseen forces, by nodes, by the lattice itself. The energy of the nodes pulsed, each a thread in a grand tapestry connecting human history to something far beyond comprehension. And within this chaos, a pattern emerged. The lattice was not malevolent, it was observing, recording, influencing, and evolving, an entity of consciousness spanning dimensions and time. Mark's hands shook as he recorded measurements and photographs. "It's incredible," he whispered. "The lattice, it's everything. History, perception, events, symbols all connected. And we're part of it. Witnessing it. Participating." Lydia nodded, her mind overwhelmed by the clarity and magnitude of what they were seeing. "We've documented each node, endured every trial, and followed the lattice to its convergence. The proof is out there, as the entity promised. We see the design, and we understand our role within it." The shadows began to recede, the entity's presence condensing to a singular void-like form at the center. Its voice softened, almost approvingly. "Few comprehend fully. Fewer endure. You have witnessed, documented, and integrated. The proof is revealed. The lattice underlies all, connecting every event, every thought, every perception in a web of influence and observation. You are part of the network now. Go forth, bear witness, endure, and record." As the first light of dawn illuminated the chamber, the energy gradually stabilized. The glowing lines of the lattice remained faintly visible, a reminder of the convergence they had endured. Shadows dissipated, the oppressive weight of the entity's presence softened, yet the resonance lingered in their minds and bodies. Lydia and Mark stood together, exhausted, awestruck, and profoundly changed. The proof was no longer theoretical, it was visible, experienced, and documented. They had endured the lattice, participated in its convergence, and emerged with understanding and insight beyond anything mortal. Descending the plateau, the landscape seemed ordinary again, yet every shadow, every light, every whisper hinted at the presence of the lattice extending beyond their perception. Lydia glanced at Mark. "We've seen it. We understand it. And we have documented it. The Satan files, the proof is out there." Mark nodded silently, their shared exhaustion and triumph creating a bond stronger than words. "We are witnesses now. The lattice has chosen us as part of its record." Back at the safe house, they mapped the central convergence point alongside all other nodes. The lattice sprawled across walls and tables like a living organism, now fully coherent and understandable, revealing an intricate network of influence, energy, memory, and perception. Lydia traced the lines with her fingers, feeling a sense of completion and solemn responsibility. Every observation mattered. Every alignment mattered. The nodes converge, and now we are the keepers of this knowledge. The proof is out there, visible to those who endure and observe. As night fell one final time, the whispers returned softly, curling around Lydia's consciousness. The lattice unfolds. Notes converge. Witness, endure, document. The proof is revealed, and those who follow shall see. She closed her eyes, absorbing the enormity of what they had witnessed. Opening them again, she felt an unwavering resolve. The journey had reached its culmination. The Satan files had revealed their ultimate truth. They had endured, documented, and now bore witness to a design hidden within the very fabric of reality itself, a lattice connecting human perception, history, and influence in ways that transcended comprehension. For Lydia and Mark, the world had changed irreversibly. They had glimpsed the extraordinary, documented the incomprehensible, and survived the trials imposed by the lattice. And though the proof was out there, waiting for others to see and understand, they knew their lives, and their understanding of reality, would never be the same again. The Satan files had completed its revelation, and the final convergence had left them as witnesses to a truth that would resonate far beyond the bounds of ordinary perception.